Welcome back to Pixel Project Radio, the video game discussions podcast where we do deep dives and analyze all of our favorite games, and some of yours too. My name is Rick, I'm your host, and today we are doing something special. We are revisiting a game that we have formerly covered on the show, and that game is Final Fantasy IX, the final series installment on the PS1. Stick around to the end of the episode, as always, where you can hear our social plugs. You'll hear where you can find us online, our Discords, Instagrams, Twitters, and etc. My guest today had to be somebody very special. He is somebody that loves Final Fantasy IX as much as I do. I know this game means a lot to him, and it was a no-brainer to ask Eric from the Unlockables Podcast to join me. Eric, thanks for joining me, man. How's it going?
Rick, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on, sir. I really appreciate it. Man, I'm just really honored to be here. When you asked me to do this game, knowing how much it meant to you and how much it means to me, I couldn't say yes fast enough. This episode, what you did so many years ago, a couple years ago now, was part of the reason I started listening to Pixel Project Radio and part of the reason I met you. So I always felt like some point in the future, this collab over this game was kind of inevitable, and I'm so excited that it's here.
You and me both, man. And I'm really glad that you said yes. I couldn't think of anyone that would be a better guest to help me get through this game. I should explain before we move forward a couple of things at the top here. So first of all, the spoiler wall. This episode, along with the next two, are going to go through the story beat by beat, very in-depth. For this episode, if you want to play along, I'm going to let Future Rick jump in and tell you exactly where we are going to stop today. Future Rick, let him know. Hi, everybody. Future Rick here. Today we are going to be talking through the game up until the end of Disc 1. We will not spoil anything as we go, but that will be our stopping point. All right, now back to you guys. And, oh, hey, Rick, the stairs. Watch out for the stairs tomorrow, man. Be careful. Thank you, Future Rick. Ominous little warning at the end there, but that is where we will be stopping today.
It's like he's here in the room with me.
It's like he's here in the room with me, too. So, if you want to play along, if you haven't finished the game before, we are going to be playing up until then. Just so you know, as we go through the story, we will not spoil future plot points. So, if something happens in Disc 3, if a revelation occurs, and we don't know about it in Disc 1, but it's hinted at, we are not going to spoil it. So feel free to play along as you are playing. You will be okay in terms of spoilers. I wanted to explain the revisiting aspect of this as well. We covered, as Eric alluded to, Final Fantasy IX on this show before. We covered it back in, I want to say, July of 2021, when we were brand new. This was back when the show was me and two co-hosts. And for a lot of reasons, I have been open about not being proud of that coverage. We were brand new, as I just said, so we were still getting the hang of scheduling, parsing out our time to play, even just being on mic. All of that was brand new. We were still working through it. So in that sense, it felt a little unpolished. For various reasons, personal life reasons, work reasons, whatever, going through those episodes, my two co-hosts were unable to finish the game. One of them, I don't think, actually played the game, which made things a little bit difficult. All this to say, there was a lot working against us. We didn't finish the series. It's still left unfinished, and I've always wanted to go back and redo this. Because we are coming up on the 100th episode, I thought this would be a great thing to do. What better game than the game that, is my all-time favorite? So this series will conclude on its 100th episode with this game. It just felt like the puzzle pieces fit together too perfectly. So that's what we're doing here. The first part of this series was a solo essay where I go through all the background and stuff like that. I wanted to do that just because you heard the background in the original episode, and I wanted to do something different. I don't know if I'm going to keep that format for future revisiting episodes or anything of the like. I might abandon it. I'm not sure. I just wanted to try something a little different. So that's how that's going to go. And I think that about covers it. Thank you for sitting through that explanation, Eric.
Oh, no problem. It's kind of weird because not to interject to make it about me, but my own journey kind of parallels your own as well. In 2020 when I was doing a show along with somebody, and I decided to strike out on my own. So almost like beautiful poetry of the universe.
Everything is connected.
It is.
So before we dive into the story, one thing we are bringing back in 2024 are the miniature reviews up top, the TLDR reviews, the elevator pitches, what the games mean to us, etc. What started off as the one-sentence summaries and blossomed into however many sentences you want. So we're going to do that now. So Eric, what do you have for us? What does this game mean to you? What's your elevator pitch? What do you have to say about it?
Yeah, so I tried to keep it as short and sweet as I possibly could. I wrote, meant to be a celebration of the series before 10 heralded in a new era, Final Fantasy IX defines Final Fantasy for me. Few games have had as big an impact on my life, my tastes in games, and just the way I feel in general. It is the quintessential Final Fantasy experience, unchallenged by any game that came before or after. So that's my pitch, and I cannot describe how immensely important this game is to me. When I discovered Final Fantasy IX and these types of games, it changed my view of the way stories could be told. I've always been an avid consumer of stories, of tales, and when I discovered Final Fantasy IX when I was 10 years old, it just kind of blew my mind that there was anything out there telling stories like this. So any given day, this game is my number 1 or number 2 game of all time. So yeah, it's immensely important to me.
Yeah, those of you that only know Eric from the Unlockables with Kingdom Hearts, turns out there's another JRPG in his life.
Famously didn't have Nomura included, so I finally got away from him for a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. I guess he didn't work on this in any sense of the word, huh?
Yeah.
So mine is not going to be very dissimilar from yours. We're not going to really have a lot to argue or parse out here. So I'll just read it and we can move right on. It is difficult to overstate the impact Final Fantasy IX has had on my taste in gaming. It was the first narrative-driven game I had ever played, and taught me that there is more value in the medium than pressing buttons to deplete a health bar. As a child, I delighted in the goofy characters and the idea of the good guys using their friendship to beat the bad guys. As an adult, the themes of determinism, choosing to live, anti-war, and more continue to spark thought and conversation among myself and my peers. After all these years and playing most of the series, I can still confidently say that Final Fantasy IX is the epitome of the Final Fantasy series. We're going to save the community forum for the final episode on this one. Again, just trying something different, but the community forum is here to stay. You'll notice that the boos did not come in unless they snuck in behind my back. Who am I paying to edit these things? We got to fire that guy.
Maybe he just needs a raise, Rick.
I can't afford to give him more than what I'm giving him already. Double of nothing is nothing, baby.
True that.
Just so listeners know, I edit the show.
Right.
I'm not skimping out on paying an editor.
No, we just really actually hate that guy.
One of us does, I can say that much.
Oh, jeez.
So, on that note, let's dive right in. We're going to jump right into the story of Final Fantasy IX. Cue the music. So I've been really into intros for the past year. I've just been really fascinated with how different series handles them. And I'm curious what you think. And by the way, intro and prologue, we can kind of think of those as two different things, right? The introduction is within the prologue. The prologue is kind of a broader scope. We'll talk about the prologue here in a bit, but the intro begins with a blistering storm on the seas. A small wooden ship is seen, barely staying afloat. As it's tossed around, we can see two passengers, possibly a mother and a daughter. In a blink, we're in a new setting, and it's revealed or assumed that this was just a daydream. A fancy room and a young woman in a royal gown. She looks out of her castle window to survey the land, giving us a taste of what sort of world this will be. Eric, did you play Final Fantasy 6 or 7 or 8 before this?
No, this was my first Final Fantasy. So I've since gone back and played 7 and 8, and 6 is on my list to play next year. It's at the very top of the backlog list.
That's right. You did say that. I just have mic brain, you know? You get on the mic and you forget the most basic things.
It's okay. The people really know where I stand now.
The reason that I ask is because starting with 6, the Final Fantasy series started to get away from fantasy. It started to introduce steampunk elements in 6. I mean, not steampunk like you're thinking, like Tumblr, but, you know, steam engines were a big thing. Technology was a big thing in that game. 7 and 8 continued that up until, 8 is kind of a science fiction game. 9 is not. 9 is a strict return to form. This would be the final game that Hironobu Sakaguchi, the series creator, the Gooch, would be at the helm on. And additionally, this is the final game where Nobuo Uematsu, the series composer, would be the lead composer. Starting with 10, Sakaguchi stepped away, and Uematsu had some help on that soundtrack. And these days, he's not affiliated with it at all, outside of his, themes being reworked for 14. So this, combined with this being a swan song to the PS1, a salute to the entire series, it really makes an impression. It makes a strong impression throughout these opening scenes.
And I think, too, just kind of what I mentioned in my elevator pitch with Sakaguchi kind of departing, with Uematsu not having full control over the music, it really is the end of an era of Final Fantasy. It marks a very clear departure going into 10. And just a tidbit, too, about Uematsu, I love this trivia fact right here, is like he was only supposed to do a handful of songs for the 9 soundtrack, but he was just like, yeah, let me keep going, and ended up doing like 160 songs. I think only 120 got used. So man, just when he sets his mind to something, he does not quit.
Yeah, out of the first 9 games, maybe the first 10 games, this has the most individual audio tracks out of all of them. It's really spectacular.
And he's on record saying this is his favorite soundtrack he ever did too. So
I'm not at all surprised. We take the control now of a young boy. He's got blonde hair and a monkey tail. We've got a monkey boy. He's alone in the room, in this dark room, and all he has for a light is a match. We light the candle that's in the center of the room, and we meet up with 3 of our colleagues, Blank, Marcus, and Cinna. Our character's name is Zidane. And I guess that's the first name that we're going to pronounce. So we should say, this was before voice acting, and we've been pronouncing these names for 20 years now. So I'm not changing. I know in Japanese it's Chitan, and I know it's probably pronounced Zidane, but I'm saying Zidane.
I'm happy you did, because I'm in the same boat with you. I'm in the Zidane camp. I'm firmly in the Titus camp. That's how I've pronounced it for years. So yeah, it's always Zidane.
I've gone around to calling him Titus. I don't know why. It just sounds better to me. That's ultimately what it comes down to. It's like if I want to justify it, I'll say, well, in Japanese, it's Tita. And then if not, I'll just say, well, I've been saying it this way for years. It's Masamune. It's not Masamune.
Oh, man, that's another one I'll get in trouble for then.
I got dragged about that during the Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger episodes, so don't worry. Those colleagues are talking to us, and no sooner do they start, does a man jump in. He's a large man wearing a giant dragon helmet. This is going to be our boss, Baku. A short fight occurs to just sort of introduce us to the battle system. What do you think about the battle system in this game?
I'm kind of in a unique position because this was my first experience other than I played Super Mario RPG before this. This was kind of my first experience to like the Square Enix, the Final Fantasy turn-based battle system. Although obviously in this game you have the ATB system that was innovative for this game. So I'm not really sure like what other people's opinions on it are, because I know a lot of people played 7 and 8 before. But to me, like I absolutely love the battle system because it's like my first experience. So like the position of first time experiencing something is very powerful. So it is really the lens I view all other Final Fantasy battle systems through. And then after this, my gaming trajectory kind of takes me on I kind of branch off from Kingdom Hearts and go down the Nomura Kingdom Hearts path. So I think the ATV battle system here is really good. I know there's some criticism thrown at it where it's just like, oh, some of the bosses are just like long for the sake of being long, and it's kind of artificial challenge in there. But I love this. It's really unique now, having gone back and played 7 and 8 now, where those were just 3-party three-party members on the battlefield at the time, going back to the traditional 4. So, which threw me off the first time I went back, because I was like, there's supposed to be 4 guys on the screen. Like, what is happening here? Why are we only doing 3? So, yeah, I love the battle system. It's not overwhelming in this first fight either. It's very simple to teach you, attack. Zidane has an additional, and all the members of Tantalus have an additional ability called Steal. So it really teaches you can do different things on your turn depending on like what abilities you have. So I think it's a great intro to. It's not an overwhelming introduction to the battle system.
And those abilities are going to depend on what class your character is. Another return to form in this game is that all of the party characters are going to be directly corresponding, or mostly directly corresponding, to an established class. So Zidane and the Tantalus boys, they are thieves. Thieves would be the, I guess, American plural of that. So yeah, we can steal and such with them and use thief skills. The main criticism, I think, of the battle system is it's just really slow if you're playing on original hardware. The load times are slow. The amount of time that elapses between choosing an action and having your character go is quite slow. It's just all around very, very slow. How are you playing it for this playthrough? I understand that you blazed through another playthrough before I even got out of disc 1, basically. How are you playing this?
Yeah, so I was playing on the Steam Deck. So I played the version on Steam that was released, and it has the options to like fast forward or give you 999 damage every hit, or give you full health and full MP every battle. So anything that was like kind of like, oh, I just need to get through this quickly, I would like turn that on and kind of blaze through it. Turning it off to like really challenge myself with like the boss fights and stuff, or like pivotal moments. So yeah, the game was designed back then to be a grind, and back then you don't really know any better because that's just kind of how games were back then. But yeah, now comparing to like how fast you get in and out of combat in like modern RPGs, yeah, Final Fantasy IX on original hardware is very slow, because a battle will start, the room will kind of zoom in, you have like 3 or 4 panning shots of the battlefield, and then your party will appear, and then the enemy will appear, and then you start battling. So it's a good like 10-15 seconds before you start battling.
It's very cinematic, but it does get old after a minute,
It does. So I would always flip on the speed to just like get through that intro, and then flip the speed off to fight the battle.
I'm playing on Steam as well. I'm using the Maguri mod, which I know I talked about in episode 1. That is the background portion of this game. Are you using that mod, Eric?
No, I was just playing it original, but I remember you telling me about it, and I do have a very vested interest in going back and playing with that mod, because you were telling me that's like the quintessential way to experience it now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's no doubt in my mind that this is the definitive way to play it. It's a bit tricky to set up on Steam Deck. I've never tried it. It's just very involved, but that's how we're playing it, just in case that matters to you at home.
As our good friend Cade says, praise the mods in the name of Kojima the Sun.
So after the fight, it was Baku all along. He's our boss. He's a big man with goggles. He kind of looks like Final Fantasy IV Sid, just a big guy with a beard, goggles. I wonder if it wasn't modeled after him. Mm-hmm. This game has so many references to every Final Fantasy up to this point, and to 10, believe it or not. There's one reference to FF10. It's explicit because it says FF10. And also some references to other Square products like Parasite Eve, Chrono Trigger, etc. But even Blue Blasty, one of Uematsu's first composed games, has references to so much. We're not going to hit them all. We'll get to some of them. But that is our boss, Baku. He just wanted to give us a little hearty joke. This is just him having a good time with the lads, taking a Bosch time with the lads. So he takes us into the next room. We're going to debrief for our mission. Our mission is to put on the play I Want to Be Your Canary by Lord Avon at Alexandria and kidnap Princess Garnet. This group is called Tantalus. They are a group of traveling thespians that also moonlight as thieves. I love this concept.
Yeah, I do too. And like I said, first Final Fantasy, and now kind of going back and being able to appreciate it, just kind of the way the other Final Fantasy games open. Like you get this insane cinematic for 8 where Squall is fighting this dude, and you have the infamous bombing mission in Final Fantasy 7. And so for this game to open up like kind of classic fantasy style, it's like we're a bunch of thieves, we're going to kidnap a princess. Like that's such an incredible premise. And really too, all their kind of designs are the designs of Tantalus overall kind of play into that. Oh, we're these thieves, but we're also this theater troupe. Like Zidane has this very he has like a lapel and like flowing sleeves and very dramatic. And all the members of Tantalus just look like silly and goofy. Like Blank wears a belt over his face. Like Marcus has this bandana on. He's kind of got this snaggletooth sticking out. Cinna just looks really ugly, like with this goatee he's got going on and this pot that he wears on his head. So yeah, it's such, I could talk about this intro for hours, so I'm just going to let us go on.
It's very Shakespearean. And it's also worth noting, too, that they're good at what they do. They're very good at acting. Like, they're not just a bunch of schmucks that use it as a cover-up. They're good at what they do, and that means thieving, too. Mm-hmm. Another interesting thing here, Tantalus is actually a Greek myth. Or he may have been a real person, a Greek king, a myth. It's also the origin of the word tantalize. It goes that he tried to hoodwink the gods, and his punishment was to stand forever in a river beneath a fruit tree. If he tried to reach the fruit, the branches would move. If he tried to reach down for a drink, the water would recede. So, tantalize. That's where we get that word. That's the last that we're going to see of them for now, though, because we switch to a cutscene in a village square, where a young boy, a personification of the Final Fantasy I Black Mage sprite, looks around and then up in awe as a flying airship passes. This is where the camera pulls out, and it sort of swivels and trucks around to show the landscape as triumphant music plays, and we get our title card, Final Fantasy IX.
When we talk about this era of Square, I don't think, if you're a little bit younger, if you were born after 2000, like Square dominated the latter half of the 90s because of moments like this. Like you see that cinematic shot of the theater ship pulling up to this castle perched on a waterfall with a sword sticking out of it. And Square was really on the cutting edge of like these types of graphics. Like nobody else was doing this. That's what made them so amazing. That's what made Final Fantasies such an incredible product. And it's something that they've kind of lost over the years because technology and people caught up with them. But in the 90s, this was the pinnacle. It was so cool, man.
Absolutely. Final Fantasy VIII looked amazing on original hardware. This looked even better. And the what makes it look so good is that they stopped going for graphical fidelity and trying to make things look realistic and went more for an art direction approach, which is why these cutscenes look so damn good.
And it's definitely one of the most unique art styles in the entire series, for sure. The way they went with like the smaller kind of chibi models, everyone's like more compressed, but it absolutely, it worked. I know for some people, like if you're coming from 7 and 8 or coming from different Final Fantasy games where everyone is more lifelike or it looks more like real people, it's a little bit jarring, but I think it's so, everything about this game, the art direction, it's so good.
Absolutely agreed. This 9-year-old boy who we are about to take control of, is Vivi Ornitier. He's a fan favorite character. He is the Black Mage sprite. He is characterized immediately as being sort of timid and clumsy. He gets bumped around. He drops his ticket to the play. He's just a little kid, basically. How do you feel about Vivi?
Vivi's my favorite Final Fantasy character of all time. I remember the first time I saw him, I was so just captured by his design, and like even not knowing RPGs or video games, you can just tell by his design. It's like, oh, he's got a wizard hat, like his eyes are like shrouded, just kind of his design. He's a magic user. So again, just I can't applaud the art direction enough. And yeah, it's so cool now that I have experienced like more of the series and looking back and seeing the original designs for the Black Mage. I'm like, oh, like it makes perfect sense that they would include this in a celebration of the entire series. So yeah, I love Vivi. I think his whole intro here sets up his character arc so great. Like I said, we'll talk about it as this goes on, but they set him up as like this curious, like kind of timid kid, and from there it just, his story is so great. So yeah, Vivi is so cool.
Even his theme that you can hear playing now, or you have been hearing playing, is intensely quizzical and curious. And I think that's one of the strengths of this soundtrack, is how adept Uematsu is at writing themes and characters into his music. Mm-hmm. You know, we talk about what is a music's character. It's sometimes up to the performer's discretion, yes, making informed decisions, but it's also about diving into the music and seeing what the composer or the written music is trying to say. And Vivi's track is extremely quizzical. We're going to meet so many more characters whose themes are just spot on. And we're going to talk a lot about Vivi. So for the sake of time, let's just push forward. Vivi is excited to see this play, but when he runs up, turns out his ticket is a fake.
Mm-hmm.
He's extremely disappointed. So he's walking around some more, and in the alley, we bump into a rat kid. That's his name, Rat Kid, for now. He says, hey, I saw that whole ordeal. I can get you in to see this play. You just got to be my slave. What a deal.
Listen, if I was walking down the streets and like somebody offered me tickets to a sporting event I really wanted to go to, and they're like, you just need to do indentured servitude towards me, I would have a hard time saying no to that deal. So I relate to Vivi 100%.
I don't need my sense of self. What I need is a ticket to see, I don't fucking know, the Steelers lose in one of their games.
Right, exactly.
So we are going to say yes to this, obviously. And all this really amounts to is following this kid around. We learn in a minute his name is Puck, likely a Shakespeare reference. We're just following him around. He's got a ladder. We're going to use that to cross the rooftops to get into the show. On our way, we are introduced to the Moogles. Oh, I love the Moogles.
The best characters in the game, by far. Oh, the iconic.
I think for my money, 9 does them the best, or at least that's my favorite iteration. 16, to its credit, I like how they did the Moogles, but they're just short, chubby little guys here.
Yep. They're just there to help you save.
It's great. Somehow their little tiny wings can carry them through the air. It's awesome. Yes, and as Eric just said, they do help you save. There's also a side quest that spans the entire game here, known as Mognet. We might talk about that at the end if we have time, at the end of the series if we have time. All it is you're hand-delivering letters to Moogles. It's basically the quest in Link's Awakening where you're just trading items for items for items for items, you know?
It's the Moogle Express, essentially. So they're trying really hard to develop their own mail system. So more power to them.
Exactly. You also meet a special Moogle here named Stiltskin. He gives you deals throughout the game. You want to buy all the deals. You want to buy all the deals so he can keep traveling, and eventually he gives you a good item.
Yeah, he's just like, I'm leaving on my journey, and you'll run into him pretty much everywhere you go. He's a well-traveled Moogle, that's for sure.
So we make it in. We get a cutscene here as the nobles are waiting for the play to start. Vivi and Puck did manage to get in. When the curtains go up, we're introduced to Queen Braun, who is standing or sitting with Princess Garnet and a knight right behind them. Queen Braun is purposely made to look extremely ugly. She's got a horrible pigtail hairdo. Her skin is blue. She's extremely fat. Just represented to be very unlikable, unsavory. Which
is kind of in cool contrast because a lot of time when you see like these strong evil female characters, their beauty is part of what makes them so evil. So to see Final Fantasy IX kind of subvert this expectation and be like, no, she's just this grotesque person. Like really, that's the only word you can describe her with. It's a nice departure.
I don't know that I would call it subversion. There's been the trope of making villains fat and having fat equal evil for a long time.
That's true.
Disney is they're particularly good at this horrible stereotype. Princess Garnet, though, is looking dejectedly at the floor. Something is bothering her. The knight notices, this is Steiner, Captain Adalbert Steiner. We'll meet him in a minute. He notices this, and he's briefly wondering, but he looks resolved to do his duty. Fireworks shoot off into the night, and the play is underway. This is where we see Tantalus knows how to act. We sort of play through this intro of the play. There's not really anything to talk about here. It's just a kind of a love story. There is a sword fighting minigame that we get to play here with one of my favorite tracks in the game.
I remember, so the sword fighting minigame is like this, kind of like Simon Says, like Blank and Zidane are stage fighting for the crowd, and so you really have to just kind of follow Blank's lead, and Blank will shout out button commands and button prompts to you to press to perform the sword fight. And depending on how you perform, the crowd will be impressed or not impressed. There are 100 nobles there, and you can get all 100 of them to be impressed, and also Queen Bran to be impressed as well. And that you pretty much kind of have to be more or less perfect. So yeah, I remember as a kid playing that mini game for hours and hours and hours and hours, just trying to perfect it. And that mini game kind of spawns off of a boss fight that they have with Baku, who's playing the king in the play. Which, by the way, I think that boss fight is super cool, just because it has one of my favorite tracks on the soundtrack, which is Swords of Fury. That battle theme is so cool, and it's only, if I remember correctly, it's only used in this specific moment. Like, it's so crazy that Uematsu wrote this epic piece of music to be used like in this moment, and I don't, at least in my experience, like we never see that track ever again throughout the entire game. So
yeah, and that's got to be part of why this is 4 discs instead of 3 too. There's just so much memory that needs to be used.
Right. Did you get all 100 nobles to like your sword fighting play, Rick?
I always do. I mean, it's more difficult, to be fair, on original hardware and on the Switch if it's in docked mode. That introduced a lot of input delay for me, and it was a real bear to actually do it. But if you're playing it on Steam, the input delay is extremely reduced, and it's really not all that difficult anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you get a special item if you impress all 100 nobles and Queen Bran. I think it's an elixir.
And lots of money.
Yes, and lots of money. So backstage, Blank and Zidane drop the act, and they beat up some of the Knights of Pluto. They're kind of some of the castle's guards to steal their armor. There's a funny little scene here where Blank is just listing off all the things that he doesn't like about the armor. It's kind of funny. And that's another thing about this game, too, is it represents the perfect marriage of the theatricality of the SNES games. I talk about this all the time, and some of the more heartfelt themes that the PS1 era brought. We've seen them try to do that in later games, like in Lost Odyssey, a little bit in some of the later Final Fantasy games, and it just never hits like it did in this era. It's a shame, but here, it's great.
Yeah, and it just, and little moments like that too just do such a good job of, they're so subtle, but they do such a great job of just kind of flushing out the characters in these little moments. Because yeah, Zidane's like, my helmet stinks, and he throws it on the table. He's like, not going to wear it. And Blank's like, well, dude, he's like, my armor's way too big. He's like, I got crumbs in my pockets. Like, my gloves are all wet. So yeah, it's just a funny little moment.
So it's now we're off to steal the princess now that we've got these disguises. As we're running up the castle stairs, though, we see a strange girl dressed in the white mage robes from Final Fantasy I. She runs into us. She asks, can you let me through? Zidane, he's a bit of a skirt chaser, so you get the option here. You can take a look at her, and he says something like, oh, have we met before? I would never forget a pretty face like yours. And she, once Blank comes up, she takes off, and Zidane is like, Blank, we got to go. That was Garnet. We got to get her.
I believe the kids today would say Zidane has the Riz, as they would say.
He is a Rizzler, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and that tells you a lot about his character. I remember reading about, they came up with a bunch of the characters before they started working on the game, and Sakaguchi was like, they're like, well, what about the main character of this game? What's his thing? What's his personality? And Sakaguchi's just like, he likes girls. That's it. That's what he likes. He likes girls.
We're going to let our audience live vicariously through him. And someday in southwestern Pennsylvania, a young fat boy is going to see Zidane and be like, I want to be just like him when I grow up. I didn't actually say that.
I wish I had the Riz that Zidane did.
Oh, of course. Who wouldn't want that?
I won't say that word anymore, I promise.
We could see how much more Gen Z slang we can throw into here. Or is that Gen Alpha? That's a thing now. Apparently there's a distinct difference between the two.
Yeah, I don't know. I blinked when I graduated in 2014, and all of a sudden there's 2 new generations, so don't know where all the time went.
Yeah, I blinked and now all my money's going to taxes.
Oh, yeah.
So we get a brief scene here with the court jesters Zorn and Thorn. Their music, which you can hear now, is just incredible.
It's so good.
It.
It's so good.
They have this peculiar speaking pattern where one of them speaks normally and the other kind of speaks sort of like Yoda. His sentences are broken up and usually they rhyme with what the other says. It's played for comedy. They realize that the princess is gone and they go to tell Queen Braun. Steiner at first doesn't want to let them through, but there's another general here named General Beatrix who treats them more kindly. She lets them through. Beatrix, we'll talk about her more as the game goes through. She is one of my favorite characters in this game.
Yes.
She's kind of like a female version of General Leo from FF6, just very devout to their duties, very polite to most people, even the enemies who she engages into combat with. Her arc, I really love her arc, and I can't wait to talk about it. But for now, all you need to know is that there's kind of a rivalry between Steiner and Beatrix. It's more so on Steiner's side, though. He resents that she gets promoted more than he does.
Like, it really tells you a lot just from that small interaction where he's like, curse that Beatrix, always one-upping me. And you're just like, oh, like, Steiner's kind of always in the position where, like, he's never doing the right thing. And Beatrix always seems to get all the lucky breaks. She's in the right place, right time. She always, gets noticed, the credit, the permission. And rightfully so. We'll see, like you said, we'll see later on that she's very capable of what she does.
And it's interesting he feels that way because according to the Ultimania, he got his position in the Alexandrian castle basically just by beating her out of pure luck. And then they let him in to the army. And that's how he got to lead the Knights of Pluto.
Interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of Steiner, though, we're taking control of him now. His music perfectly characterizes him as a character. It's so forcibly serious that it becomes funny. It's bumbling, it's clumsy, it's oafish. Brilliant. And it also sounds a lot like Prokofiev's Dance of the Knights, which I think I'm going to splice that in right now.
It totally does. You're right. It sounds great.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Yeah, just as a bit of comparison. Yeah, it kind of starts with the same sort of motif. Mm-hmm. So our first point of action here is we've got to assemble our Knights of Pluto. They are kind of Steiner's lackeys. They're all gone. We've got to find all these rascals. There's one of them named, I don't know how to pronounce this, Dojibon, that is in this sort of square room. He'll run away from you if you try to catch him. I caught him on my first try because I'm built different like that, you know?
There you go. Steiner's fast. You can't get away from him.
If you find all of your lollygagging good-for-nothing Knights of Pluto, I think there's 8 of them. 8, 10, something like that.
I think there are 8, yeah.
If you find all of them, you get an elixir, which is pretty cool.
I like the Knights of Pluto a lot. They're just kind of like like your lollygagging good old boys at any kind of job you had growing up, they're kind of hanging out. They want to get through the day without having to do too much. I appreciate.
They're not like those good old boys. Let's be clear.
That's true.
They're not awful and racist. They're just right. they're doofuses.
Yep.
Steiner gets to the top of the West Tower and he says fatigue rears its ugly head. He's looking out across to the East Tower and we can see Garnet being chased by Zidane. Steiner hasn't met Zidane yet. This leads to one of my favorite cutscenes in the first disc. Garnet kind of jumps on top of the ledge of the tower, and we see her look at Zidane, and out of nowhere, she grabs one of the festival, what do you call them? Those strings of flags, What are those called?
Like I want to say streamer, but it's not a streamer, but I know exactly what she means. Yeah, it's like a rope with flags on it.
Yeah, she grabs one of those and jumps off. She's able to swing down to safety. She's clearly done this before, to Zidane and Steiner's shock. Garnet and Zidane are able to make it onto a canopy pretty safely. Steiner, though, ties the rope around his waist and soars with his arms out like a plane directly into the tower head first. Just crashes right into it.
Which it's amazing that none of the people in the audience like see this going on below, because they're not that far down. So you would think you'd see people like swinging overhead of you, and a large man in armor literally slam into the side of the ship that people are performing on. But it's that classic that kind of a little bit of comedy in there, and really the whole section kind of tells you a lot about Steiner's character, right? He's kind of like a bumbling goof, but he takes himself and his duties like very, very seriously.
We're going to be chasing Garnet here for just a few more minutes. I like the attention to detail here when Garnet runs past the band that's playing. Mm-hmm. By the way, I think it's here, playing the march for Rufus from Final Fantasy VII. They're playing that music. There's a callback. As she runs past them, the music kind of like goes off key and starts to fall apart and become discordant. It's really nice.
And all the band members kind of like swirl around and like fall down too.
It's so good. We do catch up to her though, Zidane does. And of course she reveals, you probably knew this, but hey, I'm Princess Garnet. And turns out she wants to be kidnapped. So not only were we ordered by someone to kidnap her, she wants to go. Trouble is, Steiner and his knights aren't so far behind. Cinna happens to come in here and takes us into a back room with a trap door. I think this was the room that we had the Tantalus meeting in.
Yeah.
He opens up the floor and they all jump down. Steiner and one of his knights come in right after. And of course, Steiner says, oh, they probably jumped in down there. The knight says, oh, I'll go first, sir. And he jumps down and promptly gets stuck in the hole. And it turns out as he walks away, it's Blank. He's dressed up. Blank did this on purpose to throw Steiner off. If you're playing on the HD versions, you can actually see it is Blank by his facial features. It's pretty cool.
You think that Steiner would know, like the knights that under his command, but obviously he couldn't tell.
They're like a bunch of children. He probably just doesn't have time to deal with their shit. It's enough work just corralling them together.
Right.
So we're going into the belly of the ship, but we're not alone for long because Steiner confronts us with Blank. And after a few turns, Blank uses his secret weapon. We didn't talk about this a few minutes ago, but the plan was once they stole the armor, Blank has a bunch of bugs called oglops. They're, they're like potato-sized bugs. I don't know how else to describe them.
They're like really big, nasty, like cockroach type things. Like, and he's not exaggerating. They're very large.
Blank hid a bunch of them in his armor, and now as Steiner smashes him, his armor comes off and the oglops swarm all over the screen. Steiner hates oglops. We find that out here because he yells, I hate oglops, and he starts running around.
The old oglop in the armor trick. Classic.
Many a better man has fallen to it than Steiner.
You're right.
It was inevitable for him.
Yeah.
We try to escape. We get onto these elevators below deck, but Steiner hops on too, and wouldn't you know it, these take us up onto the stage, while everybody in the audience is looking. Turns out, obviously Tantalus is good at improvising because they're thespians, but Garnet, it's revealed here, has studied literature all her life, so she can improv too. Steiner, meanwhile, just like hangs with his mouth open, staring at the audience.
So you're probably wondering how I got here.
Yeah, exactly.
Total that moment.
Exactly. He's not even subtle about it. He's just staring. He's making eye contact with children. Chaos is ensuing here. Vivi and Puck have been found by the guards, so they're being chased. Vivi runs up on stage just because that's where he was chased to. He uses some fire magic here. This is solidifying that he can use fire magic. Some of it nicks Garnet's robe, and she throws it off. So everybody in the audience and on stage knows exactly who she is. Immediately, Baku just says, all right, we're done. We got to go. And they run. This is where Steiner's moral dilemma first comes up. And this is what makes Steiner such a great character. We're going to talk about it more as we go. But Garnet tells him, hey, I'm leaving on my own accord. I want to do this. Don't follow me. He hesitates for a minute. Even this early, he hesitates, and then he says, no, I can't comply. I've got a duty. I've been told what to do. I've got to do that.
Yeah, I think too. A lot of people talk, Final Fantasy IX and character arcs, and a lot of people focus on, Vivi and Zidane, who are obviously have two of the better arcs in Final Fantasy. But I've always been of the opinion that Steiner's arc is sneakily just very good because, like you said, it sets up this character that's incredibly like he's devoted to his duty, and his duty to the princess and the queen are like what defines his life, like what drives his life. And for the first time kind of in his life here, it's like she's telling him, hey, I want to do this, and he's like, well, I need to do what she's telling me, but also like I can't let her leave. So yeah, it sets up such a great arc for Steiner, which we'll talk about in future games. And yeah, like you said, sets off all kinds of chaos because Tantalus is basically like, time to get out of here. They start to fire up the theater ship and are just like we're taking off, plays over, everybody's kind of scattering. Yeah, it's absolute chaos.
Steiner, I think Steiner is the best character in the game. As far as the character arcs go, I really truly think that. Vivi's is really good too, don't get me wrong, but especially the older you get, I think Steiner hits a little harder with his whole arc just being about gaining perspective and learning to be an individual and to take charge of that and listening to others. His worldview is black and white at this point in time, and he learns to listen to other people. He's listening and he's learning. He's doing the Notes app apology in real time.
Right. And I think that just speaks volumes too, that like you can say like, oh, Steiner has like, it speaks volumes to the quality of all the individual character arcs in this game. Cause I would say most of the main cast have pretty good arcs. I will talk about a couple that I'm not exactly thrilled about, but most of the main cast have pretty good arcs.
Yeah, I agree completely. So Braun notices this, obviously. Queen Braun doesn't want the princess running off, so she fires out some harpoons and stuff to try and get our ship to crash. There are many direct hits. She sends out a bomb, the enemy bomb, like the fire bomb. There's a brief fight with Steiner involving the bomb. Eventually it goes off, and while we do escape, the ship is so badly damaged that we crash into a neighboring forest called, appropriately, the Evil Forest. So here, for my money, this is the prologue of the game. This, like, right here, getting into Evil Forest, that's the prologue. You could also say getting through Evil Forest would end the prologue. I think either is fine. I think it's so strong. I'm thinking of 8. I'm thinking of 7. I'm thinking of 6. I'm thinking of 10. I'm thinking of 10 too. It's the strongest prologue in the series, in my opinion. That's why I said it. I didn't need to say to me. That's such a pet peeve of mine, man. When people hosting their own podcast will say an opinion and then say to me, it's like, well, yeah, you're the host.
This is my show,
else's
right?
opinion would that be?
You're right. And no, I have to agree with you. First of all, that fight with Steiner you get one last fight with Steiner while the bomb is like on board, like kind of like growing, getting ready to explode. And I really love this fight because as you're going through the whole fight and like attacking Steiner, everybody like Garnet, Zidane, Vivi is like, look behind you. There's a bomb behind you. And Steiner's basically like, you can't fool me with that old trick. Like you may have got me with the Oglop and the armor, but I'm not gonna. I mean, by the time he notices the bomb is too big and explodes, but. Yeah, you're right. I think a lot about intros, especially in these kind of games. I have a whole episode on why the Kingdom Hearts 2 intro is actually very good.
I love that intro.
Just kind of thinking about the speed at which like all this takes place in like less than an hour, and I feel like really fulfilled in like how much information the game has given me. We're introduced to like half the main cast like right away. We're introduced to the premise. We get a twist on that premise where Garnet actually wanted to be kidnapped. We get a thrilling escape, and we crash in the Evil Forest all within like a half hour or 35 minutes. It's such a strong opening. Now we have this collection of characters where they've crashed in this terrible spot. Like obviously you don't call an Evil Forest for no reason. Like it's just not like, maybe we should start naming forests like Evil Forest. Like if I drove by the Evil Forest on the highway, I probably wouldn't go there. So we have all these characters that have these misaligned interests and different kind of, Steiner obviously wants to get Garnet back to the castle. Garnet doesn't want to. Tantalus is like, fuck, we just crashed in the middle of the forest. Like, what do we do? So yeah, the prologue, the intro, so good. So good.
Not to mention, it goes through so many references to other Final Fantasies, references
Yes.
or inspirations. It just solidifies what this game is going to be. It's perfect. You know, when you're writing a book, you want your introduction, you want the first things your readers are reading to be compelling. When you're, you know, performing in music, you want the first thing that they hear, your tone, to be very good, or the piece that you're writing to be very good. It's really important. First impressions are critically important. And that's a life advice too, man. Any of you listening out there, first impressions, extremely important. Whether it's Discord or Final Fantasy IX. It's all the same.
It's true. And like I said, now we have this situation where obviously we know that our core cast right now is going to be Zidane, Garnet, Steiner, and Vivi. And all these characters are kind of like thrown together amongst this awkward circumstance where Tantalus was trying to kidnap Garnet. She wanted to escape. Steiner's trying to get her back to the castle. And Vivi is just kind of caught in the middle of all of it. And I love the dynamic that sets up pretty early on, because I think about other Final Fantasy games, and at least when I think about 7 from this era, like Cloud already kind of had an established relationship with Tifa. None of these characters that come together, like obviously there's a little bit of a relationship between Garnet and Steiner to his duty to her there, but all these other characters are like Zidane, Vivi, and Steiner are all kind of just like, we're just together because of convenience right now.
Right. And speaking of all of them, this crash has scattered everybody. Right now, it's Zidane, Cinna, and then 2 of the other Tantalus members, Zanero and Benero. I don't know that we need to talk about them too much. They're just they look kind of like anteaters wearing a BDSM mask.
Yeah.
They're,
and they have
twins.
claws for hands, like clamps.
Yeah. Before I saw it in HD, I thought it was like the Italian hand gesture, because they're always throwing it around when they're talking.
Zanero could be an Italian name, maybe. This sounds, yeah.
We get introduced to a mechanic here called the Active Time Event, or ATE. This is basically just a, quote, meanwhile, elsewhere, end quote, kind of deal, right? I love this. I love this inclusion in this game.
It fleshes out the world, because it's like, while you're walking around exploring one part, you can hit select and view optional, and it's optional too. You don't have to view it if you're in a hurry. It's just a little bit of an extra cutscene that shows a lot of the times when this happens, like other characters have like run off and stuff, and it just shows you what the other characters are doing, and it just kind of builds out the world a little bit, helps it to feel full, and like things are happening while you're exploring the world. But yeah, I love this too. It's great.
World building is something that this game does phenomenally well. And we're going to see more of that too. And the ATEs are a big part of that. This ATE, and by the way, we're not going to explain every ATE unless it's particularly funny or directly relevant to the plot. We'll probably skip them. This one is relevant though, because we see Garnet and Vivi are together in the forest running from something. And we find them pretty quickly. Zidane finds them. Vivi and Steiner are there, and Garnet has been taken by the Forest Keeper. It's this kind of big plant that sucks her up. She's in like this plant cage on top of its head, and we're about to fight him twice. Not really a big deal. These fights aren't very difficult. Technically, Garnet can die, but practically she's not going to. Really, what these are for is introducing something called trance. So trance is another callback. This was localized as morph, but this is actually Terra's ability in Final Fantasy VI. When she morphs into an Esper, it's called trance in the original. Americans got it as morph. She turns pink and her form changes, and that's exactly what happens in trance here. Zidane goes into trance. It is exposited through dialogue, which, I don't love it when it's so on the nose of characters explaining it, but it's fine. Trance happens when a warrior is, how do they explain it? Feels an intense surge of emotion. So right now, Zidane desperately wants to protect Garnet, so he goes into trance. He turns pink. His clothes are replaced by like fur. He looks a little more primal. It's exactly what Terra goes through in Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
And you become much more powerful. He gets the Dyne ability, which just, you get tons of wild energy attacks and stuff like that.
Yeah, very much a scripted sequence, obviously, to introduce this ability. Just kind of adds a little different kind of wrinkle to combat, because now after this fight, you'll have a trance meter that will fill up as you partake in battles and stuff. And
what's the worst part about trance, Eric?
It can happen anytime, or if you're trying to time it at a particular time and you run into like a random, like if you're like, oh, I want to go into this boss battle like just this far away from getting trance, and you run into a random encounter and that enemy attacks you and activates trance, then you've ruined it. So yeah, the timing of it is a little bit difficult. It's more kind of, it fills up when you take damage essentially. And it's the timing. Yeah, that's really the downside of it as a system is you don't really have a say on when it happens unless you're trying to be really, really particular. But again, with how long battles take in the original hardware, it's hard to like want to sit there and be like, I'm going to grind out till my trance meter is almost full and then go into the next thing. So yeah, there are some times that I've gotten like super lucky with it and like gotten like a clutch trance in like a really hard boss fight. And then there's times where I've gotten a trance like fighting an enemy that's like 30 levels below me. And it's just like, well, this was a complete waste. So it's a kind of a coin toss.
Yeah, it happens all the time. You get hit with trance at the very end of a random encounter, and then it's gone right after that encounter's over, even if you don't even get to use that character.
Yep. It's still cool. Very cool.
It is still very cool. Once the Forest Keeper dies, it releases these spores that knock out Vivi and Steiner. I think it hits Garnet too. Zidane manages to avoid it. It immediately cuts. We're back in the ship. Blank is tending for Vivi. He's given him some medicine. And I wrote down here, it's important to note that early on, Vivi is characterized as a child. He's hesitant to fight. He's very timid and unsure of himself. He's self-conscious. The first thing he asks Blake when he wakes up is, am I going to die? Which is like, I don't know if you've ever been in a tragic event as a kid. When I was a kid in first grade, I got hit by a car. And I remember when I woke up, the first thing, when I woke up, I was crying, and I remember thinking, why the fuck am I crying? But like, because I didn't know what was going on. And the first thing I asked the person that was there, I was like, am I going to die? And I didn't even know why I was saying that. He's characterized as a kid so well, and that is just critically important to where his plot is going.
Yeah, it doesn't help either that like Blank is giving them medicine and kind of explains to him. It's like, yeah, a lot of the monsters in this forest reproduce by planting their seeds in people, and then the seeds sprout and consume them from within, which is pretty horrifying. So good job, Blank, on the comforting of the injured Vivi. Great job.
And then it's hasta la vista, your beef jerky.
Yep, your beef jerky.
Yeah, that's what you tell a kid.
Very subtle, Blank.
Steiner is just kind of in a fog. They usher him into a storage room where he can't cause any trouble. They just lock him in there with the medicine, by the way. They're not trying to kill him.
Yeah.
Baku explicitly says he doesn't want to risk the crew's lives to look for the princess, and that pisses off Zidane a lot. Zidane tells Baku, well, too bad. I'm going to save Garnet. I'm leaving the band. I like that they call it the band and not just like the group. Because, it is a band of thieves, but it comes off as like, John, or like that, like when George left the Beatles, he just stands up and he goes, yeah, I think I'm leaving the band, actually. Just so casually. I love it.
Yeah, and then Zidane goes on to like explain his plans to Blank. He's going to rally the troops, right? He's like, I'm going to get Vivi, I'm going to get Steiner to go and rescue the princess with me, which is basically the plan. But before he can really do that, Blank tells him that he has to talk to the boss. He has to talk to Baku. And when he goes and finds Baku challenges him to a fight. He's like, you don't get to leave just scot-free. Like, I have to make an example of you as the boss. So they kind of go.
The rules.
Yeah, you know the rules. So, and we kind of get the feeling that this isn't like the first time Zidane has pulled a stunt like this. Just kind of like the context of the conversation. So, yeah, you get another kind of not a boss fight, but just an encounter where you fight Baku, and Zidane actually ends up winning, which leads to another very funny scene where Baku like kind of laughs and is almost like kind of proud of him and proceeds to like punch him in the gut as he walks away. And that's the one attack that Zidane's like, oh, he really pulled his punches until that last one there. So
yeah, it's his way of saying like, I'm proud of how I've raised you.
Yes, essentially. Touching scene. So there's a lot of subtext there that when you play later in the game and you kind of look back at it, you're kind of like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I get it.
So after Baku roughs us up a little bit, we meet up with Vivi and Steiner and get ready to go. Steiner obviously regards Zidane as just a lowly criminal, but he respects Vivi immediately. Like, he's mystified by the magic. He calls him Master Vivi, even though he's a child. He holds him in high respect.
Yeah, it's like he knows power when he sees it. So, and obviously Steiner's set of core values is like, I must honor this person that wields this kind of power, because yeah, you do experience it in battle that Vivi's black magic is right away one of the most powerful things that you have at your disposal. So
we find Garnet in the forest. She's now with the boss Plant Brain. It's not meaningfully different from the Forest Keeper. It's just a little boss, not too difficult. Once we take it out, something weird begins to happen. All of these, like, they're plant spiders, literal plant spiders, that are like the size of a child. They begin to emerge like from the woodwork, and it looks like the whole forest is chasing you. And just like in real life, like if forest activity boots up and like things are running and they're not running directly at you, you're in trouble. Like, that's nothing good is about to happen. So we start running, and this FMV is extremely impressive for the time. We have all of our group, Garnet being held by Steiner, Vivi, Blank, and Zidane running as the spiders, hordes and hordes of plant spiders, are chasing them. Vines are whipping out from the forest, and what's chasing those is petrification. We see slowly as the camera shoots it from the other perspective that all of these plants are getting petrified into stone. The whole forest is, and it's catching up really quickly. Some vines swing in to grab Zidane, and just in the nick of time, Blank pushes him out of the way, allowing himself to get caught. He throws Zidane a world map that he catches in the most action movie kind of way possible. It's great.
That map has some serious hang time. Like,
yeah.
You're just like, this map should have hit the ground by now. But yeah, excellent throw by Blank.
Yeah, dude, Blank is going to the NFL. The petrification gets him, and we manage to get out by the skin of our teeth. Zidane does a jump, he dives out, and the entire forest just closes up, and the camera reveals that, yes, Blank got petrified too. So that's the end of our brother, and we can't even get back in because the forest is now sealed.
Right, and I don't think we mentioned that either, but Blank was there because Baku, after Zidane, Vivi, and Steiner left, Baku gave some medicine and a map to Blank to go after Zidane. So despite despite all of Baku's like blustering and insistence that he has to make an example of Zidane and keep the rules, like, he does care about him enough to send another member of his band after them to make sure that they get out okay. And yeah, you kind of don't really know, the whole forest seals up, so you don't really know what happened to the rest of the people, like what happened to the rest of the band of Tantalus. Like, it was implied in the conversation between Baku and Blank that Baku was about ready to like make a trek out of the forest, but we don't know if they got out or not. And we can see what fate waited for people that apparently defeating the big forest boss monster caused the entire forest to become petrified. So it's a little bit of a cliffhanger with our friends there. We don't know if they escaped that forest or not. And as of right now, we just have to assume that everybody kind of shared Blank's fate.
Right. That's a really good point. Thank you for catching that and bringing that up. We are totally alone. All we have is each other. And right now, each other is at each other's throats. You know what I mean? We don't know if Baku and Zanera and Benero and Cinna all got out. We don't know. So we set up camp outside. We give Garnet the medicine. Steiner is furious here. He's blaming Zidane and the entire Tantalus crew, like, they're thieves. This is all your fault. I'm going to have you hanged. This is just their relationship through most of the game. Steiner agrees to protect Garnet because it is his duty until we can get to the kingdom. He doesn't like it, but it's his duty, so that's what he has to do. We've got to go into a cavern to the south where we can get out of the mist. The mist is something, it's explained here, but it's never really like a huge part of the plot until it is. So the mist is pervasive across this whole continent. That's why it's called the Mist Continent. And it's said to harbor terrible monsters. The byproduct of the mist is monsters. That's why we have random encounters here. Nice that we have a diegetic reason for it. But outside of this, until it becomes a direct plot point, you're not going to see mist when you're in the overworld or anything like that.
It's also, believe me if I'm not too, it's also kind of a resource that they utilize as well. I believe a lot of their airships they have are powered by mist as well. So it's
Yes.
it's something that is some kind of like resource, but unless it's harnessed, it can also like spawn monsters. So yeah, imagine like rolling up to the gas station and going to fill up your car, and it's just like, well, either I'll fill up my car or a Hydra monster will spawn. I guess I got to roll the dice on that today. I don't know.
Yeah, this oil can power my car and get me to work, but it also has the potential to spill into the sea and kill all the penguins and ducks.
Exactly. You're right. It's almost exactly the same.
We're sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are going to go in through the ice cavern because that'll take us through it and above the mist. And it lives up to its name. It's a pretty straightforward ice dungeon, but it's just beautifully captured rendered in ice, sprawling cave system, chilled breezes are coming through, and there's even frozen Moogles that we get to save with Vivi's fire. It's great. I think in this one you heat him up with the fire, it accidentally gets him and he jumps up in the air and he calls us bastards.
Shout out to swearing Moogles, man. Yeah, and I like how it utilizes Vivi's fire in a couple of spots where there are like these false walls that you can like use his fire on to like reveal treasure chests. Just kind of like a nice like overworld theming around Vivi's powers. Like it's really nice.
Yeah. As we're going through, we hit a particularly chilly passage, and one by one our characters start to pass out. Vivi goes first, then Steiner, then Garnet, and then Zidane. When Zidane passes out, he's the last one to do so. He hears this bell dinging. And I think maybe that wakes him up. Maybe that's what it is, because he wakes up and he says, "What was that noise?" He's still kind of dazed, but he walks to investigate, and we find Black Waltz number 1. He looks pretty similar to Vivi. It's very clearly a black mage, but he's a little taller. He's hunched over. He looks sinister. Mm-hmm. He says he's not sure why Zidane isn't asleep or dead, but he's here for the princess, and if you want to save her, you're going to have to take him out. And this begins a boss battle that can be pretty tough if you don't know how to handle it.
Yeah, you get it's a single fight. Your only character you have is Zidane. All the rest are asleep, and you end up. It originally starts, you're like, oh, it's going to be a one-on-one fight with the Black Waltz, but the Black Waltz out of nowhere just decides to summon a gigantic ice monster that's called a sea lion. And that's where the fight can get pretty hard, because it's essentially a 2-on-1. And you want to focus the Black Waltz first, because if you're trying to focus the sea lion first, the Black Waltz can use ice magic on the sea lion and heal it. So, if you're not kind of paying attention there, it's basically a 2-on-1. It's a difficult fight. One strategy is if you have enough healing items, you can kind of wait out getting trance, and then Zidane's trance abilities can take care of both of them pretty quickly. It can be tricky unless you kind of know that little caveat about it.
Not only that, but whenever you hit the sea lion, its pendant on its chest will change colors. And it starts, I don't remember what color it starts with, let's say blue. When it's blue, it's just normal attacks. If you hit it twice, it'll go to red, and then it can use its most powerful attack, and then it'll just shuffle those around for every hit you deal to it. So the best idea is, well, first you're going to want to steal, because pretty much every boss in this game has really good items. You want to steal all the time.
Always.
And then, like you said, while you're waiting for trance to build up, just take out the waltz, and then you should be able to take down Sea Lion pretty easy.
Yeah.
After the battle, he says you defeated number 1, but number 2 and number 3 will reclaim the princess. Waltz.
And we kind of get a shot, too, of, I think, when Zidane kind of walks out of that cavern where he is, it kind of pans up, and we see the familiar-looking hat, a pink and blue hat of our jester friends, Zorn and Thorn, that we met earlier in the game. Just kind of watching.
Yes, they're going to be behind a lot of our headaches as we move forward. So now with the waltz gone, the intense cold is kind of stifled a little bit. Things are going back to normal and the gang wakes up. Steiner accuses us of getting handsy with the princess for a minute because, he's Steiner. And then we head out. There is a town that we can see in the distance that Zidane says he's been to before. Steiner wants to return to the castle, obviously, and will briefly fight with Zidane over it. In the scuffle, Garnet picks up a dagger that Zidane dropped, and she asks, "Hey, what is this?" And he does the thing that eager dudes will do whenever they want to impress a lady and just start giving tons of explanations. And as he's going on about what a short sword is, she's like, oh, okay, thanks. And he hangs his head. He's like, man.
It's a literal meme or that like the guy and the girl at the baseball game and he's like explaining something to her and she's like completely not. It's that meme to a T.
It exactly is. Just shouting. She couldn't care less. This is so she'll say, oh, this is a dagger. In order to lay low and not be outed as the princess, I'm going to go by dagger for, the rest of the game. You can change it. Doesn't have to be dagger. I just kept it as Garnet. I know that's kind of immersion breaking, but I would just rather call her Garnet.
I never thought about that. That's kind of funny where it should be like, I know I'm going to go as Garnet, my name that I already am. That will disguise me perfectly. I don't particularly care for the name Dagger that much, but I get what they're going at, and she's just kind of like, I just need a name, and why not the name of a weapon to make me sound more normal? That won't draw attention at all.
Right. If she's being called Princess Garnet and she's speaking like she's royalty, she's going to get found out in an instant, which is what they want to avoid. When I was a kid, my friend and I would trade our games back and forth, like if we got stuck on stuff. And I remember being stuck on, I think it was the sea lion fight probably, and I lent it to my friend. And when he gave it back to me, he had saved after getting to Dolly, and he had nicknamed Garnet Sack Tap, like the Tony Hawk move that references tapping a sack.
Yeah.
Where you put your skateboard between your legs as if you were tapping one's sack.
Yes.
I remember being so mad, and I think I cried and got pissed, and I had to start the game over.
I just imagining where she's like on the side of the cliff, like holding the dagger, and she's like looking at it, and she's like, I know my name will be Sack Tap. Like the connection just it's not there.
Oh, so this is a dagger, huh? I want you to call me Busty Latinas.
Yes.
I don't know. As you're going over, you're going to go through the world map a little bit here. You can visit an observatory and meet somebody named Morid. He has a coffee side quest that's kind of nice. You might also run into the friendly monster side quest here. Mm-hmm. This is a cool side quest. It's signified by special music that you're hearing right now. Essentially, all of these are going to be pretty much the same. The enemies aren't going to attack you. They're going to ask you for something. The first one is going to be an ore. You give them the ore, or whatever item they want, and they'll say, thanks, tell Mr. whoever I say hello. I think this one, it's tell Mr. Ladybug I said hello, or Mr. Ghost, or whoever. That'll tell you the next friendly monster that you're going to find. And this is important if you want to do a late super boss in the game, which, again, we'll save that until the last episode if we have time. But you might run into that here. But other than that, we get into the village of Dolly, which has maybe my favorite town music in the entire game here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to head to the inn and rest. We're going to plan, figure out what our next move is.
Shout out to the innkeeper who's just asleep at the desk because it's
Sleeping
a small
on
sleepy
the job.
Yeah, it's a small sleepy town and not a lot happens.
Yeah, there's no Bezos here. You can chill.
Yeah.
You can chill and relax. Good on him. Take a nap on the clock. God bless you, I say. Garnet will reveal to Zidane here that she wanted to be captured because had the theater ship not crashed, they'd be in Lindblom. She has business there, but she doesn't say anything more at the time. So Zidane promises, yeah, I'll take you there, which causes another fight with Steiner. The next morning, Zidane is woken up by some singing, and he decides to wander town. That's Garnet singing. We figure that out in a little bit. But so we're walking around town, and one of the first things that we notice are, well, there's no adults here, just 0 adults. There are huge pieces of equipment laying around that do not fit the size of this town, and for some reason we can hear a chocobo coming from like underground. We don't know why.
Yeah, we get a couple of ATEs in this sequence too, where he's just kind of walking around, and a couple of the ATEs deal with Garnet or Dagger. She's trying to Zidane encourage her to change like the way she speaks because it's too formal. So we see a couple scenes of her like in a shop where she's like listening to 2 people talk, and she's trying to engage the local townsfolk in conversation just to kind of work on speaking more like regular people would. And I just think that's kind of cool because it kind of speaks to like her character, because we get a really interesting picture of Garnet across the board. It's like she obviously has the capability to perform like these athletic feats to escape a castle, but she doesn't really know like what life is like outside of that castle. So like she has ability and she's a strong person, but she's also kind of naive to the ways of the world. So I just think it's such a cool insight to kind of like Garnet's start of her character arc.
Yeah, overcoming her naivete and coming into her own as a person, I think, are big parts of her growth as a character.
Yeah.
And it's cool we get to see that here. We get some story-related ATEs here, too. All of the kids in this town, they, like, gawk and stare and run away from Vivi.
Right.
And at one point, Zidane will, like, catch up with Vivi. He's like, hey, how's it going? You know, you like any girls? Yeah. And after Zidane walks away, Vivi is, like, listening at this pipe underground because he hears a chocobo. And he's like, what's a chocobo? And we see him get kidnapped.
Yes.
So these kids grab him and just run away with him.
Yeah, literally, it's literally a flash too. It's like he's standing there listening to the chocobo, and then like you see like 1 second of a cutscene where he just gets grabbed, and then it's just you're like, oh, okay.
There's another ATE that we see where the innkeeper is responsible for this. He called this in, so something is going on in this town.
Yeah,
and we're about to figure it out. Zidane and Garnet, they're both worried about Vivi. They meet back up at the inn. They figure Steiner can handle himself because he's like 34 years old and a knight. But Vivi's a kid, so we go off to look for him. The place where Vivi got kidnapped, there's that little pipe coming from the ground where we heard the chocobo. And now we hear somebody crying. And we yell, and it's Vivi. He says, you know, I'm okay, but I've been kidnapped. They told me not to move. I don't know where I am. You know, please help. And it's very convenient because next door there is a ladder going into the underground. So we go down there.
Yeah. So we find out that Vivi there's this underground kind of chamber underneath this entire small kind of sleepy village. That's just, you know, when you first enter it, you're just like, oh, it's kind of a nice town. But like as you're kind of exploring it and mentioning, hey, where are all the adults? Everyone's gone. It just kind of has this overall like foreboding sense to it. And we discover this underground area where the adults like literally kidnapped Vivi and we're kind of holding him, and we see like an exchange of dialogue where the adults are like talking as if Vivi's not there even though he's in the room with them, and it's kind of like, well, why is this one here? Why does it look different than the other ones? Or like, and they mentioned something about like production, and this too is where Garnet notices like one of the barrels they're hiding behind has a sigil of the castle of Alexandria on it. So yeah, after we kind of like rescue Vivi or go to rescue Vivi, we uncover like not all is as it seems in this tiny sleepy town.
And the reason, like you said, that they're so confused as to why Vivi is here is because another thing we learned down here, we learn all of this piece by piece, which is why we're just kind of talking about it.
Right.
The adults in this town, they all work down here in this factory producing black mages. We see them being carried out of an assembly line, basically. They look almost identical to Vivi, just bigger. Why the Alexandria crest is on the barrels, we're not quite so sure yet. The mages are being produced by this machine that sucks mist from the outside, is powered by a chocobo. That's why we heard a chocobo. And the mist is somehow producing these black mages. That's all we know as of right now. This whole thing freaks Vivi out and immediately sends him into an existential crisis, which is going to be a key theme for him throughout this game. He's like, are these things me? Am I a doll? What is going on here?
And this is why I really appreciate the way they introduce Vivi in the introduction of the game, right? Because we get this
as a child.
Yes, as this innocent child who's like curious. He obviously got duped getting a fake ticket. He was naive enough to agree to be Puck's slave to like see the show. And now all of a sudden he is witnessing something that the creatures that look just like him are literally coming out of a machine and being packed into barrels. Like, just imagine what that would do to your psyche as a young child when you don't, like, Vivi very clearly doesn't know much about the world. So, yeah, it devastates him. He's just like he doesn't know how to process this at all.
Right, and he doesn't too. Like it's very realistically portrayed in that he doesn't process it all right away. He's just kind of in shock.
Right.
In less than 24 hours, he's gone from I'm excited to see this play to do I even exist? What does it mean to be alive?
And in the middle
He's
of
9.
Surviving a flaming theater ship crash, traversing an evil fort. Yeah, Vivi's had a very eventful, I mean, they all have, but as Vivi not knowing the most about anything has gone through quite the roller coaster ride in the last, 24 or however many hours it's been.
Speaking of those character arcs, though, we cut to Steiner very briefly here. He's interrogating Morid on the observatory. We may have seen him already. He's just a mustached old guy. He's not giving Steiner the time of day. It's very funny. In a previous scene, we learned that a cargo ship will often come to Dali to deliver and transport goods between Dali and Alexandria, which could explain the barrels. And he's demanding Morid tell him, like, when is it coming? And Morid's not cooperating. Steiner says, I'm just trying to do what's right. And Morid answers, who decides what's right and what's wrong? You? Steiner, anyone can tell right from wrong. Morid, ha ha ha, still as green as a pickle. And here, I mean, we're just expanding on Steiner's set up arc now. What does it mean to be autonomous? Mm-hmm. How do I balance that with authority? How do I balance that in the hierarchy of my life? Am I an individual, even though I've sworn fealty to the queen?
Yeah, he views that as very much like his duty is what defines right and wrong, right? Like, how could he possibly, he's just a lowly knight, how could he possibly understand the machinations of monarchs and rulers of countries? That defines what he views as right and wrong. That defines the societal order. And for this old guy just to be like, well, how do you know what's right and wrong? It's kind of shakes him to his core.
And it's perfectly observed, too, because, like, this is something that you don't learn in life without the process of living it. You know what I mean? We all think, like I guarantee you every kid playing this probably heard or read Morid say that, and they're like, well, I mean, Steiner's right. Anybody could tell right from wrong. And it's like, it's way more complicated than that. Like, life is not, that's like a sub-theme to this game in a way, is that life is so not black and white. There is so much gray area. Right and wrong are constructs that we don't even adhere to consistently as people ourselves. Mm-hmm. It is so much more complicated than that. And it's beautiful. It's this game is just so intensely focused on making every little thing count. And it's part of why it's so great. By the way, we kind of almost quoted Steiner's character card here. You get to see character cards if you let the title menu idle. Catch up with us on social media. I'll be posting those, each one periodically as we go through. So yeah, I'm sure I'm going to use them as like episode descriptions too. Yeah. But yeah, they are very good.
And I agree with you too, man. It's just like growing up, we are taught and we just kind of experience that the grown-ups like have all the answers. These rule structures in society won't lead us astray. We can trust and rely on them. And as we grow up and kind of start to learn about the world, we realize, like you said, not everything is as black and white. And the people that raised us didn't have any more answers than the answers we're looking for now. So yeah, it's such a beautiful theme, man.
While Steiner is blathering on, Morid kind of tells him, like, yeah, the cargo ship arrived while you were badgering me. So Steiner says thank you, and then he leaves. We find, it turns out what happened underground is that Vivi, Zidane, and Garnet got loaded up into these cargo barrels because Vivi was just, he's beside himself. He doesn't know what to do. We had to go into hiding because otherwise we would have been caught, and they got loaded up. Steiner finds it. You can either poke your sword into it or just let it tip over. It's pretty good either way.
Yep.
But yeah, he runs up. He's like, why is this barrel moving? And why is it speaking?
First reaction. Yeah. First reaction is, that's my first reaction. If I saw a container of something like moving and speaking, like my first reaction, I can't say I would react any better than Steiner. So
yeah, Steiner has a plaque on the outside of his porch that says, we don't call 911, we stab first.
Yeah, right. Yeah, trespassers will be stabbed on sight.
Yeah. We don't call 911, and it's just a picture of the Buster sword.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, I'm going to make that and put it in your merch store. That's beautiful.
So Zidane, Vivi, and Garnet spill out. There's not time to address Vivi's concerns right now. In a profoundly funny display of being a bad liar, Steiner says, "Oh, this ship is heading to Lindblom." Yeah, yes, that's it. It's going to Lindblom. And
despite the fact that all the barrels have the Alexandria crest on it, yes, totally going to Windblom.
We don't really have time to mess with them right now because Black Waltz number 2 shows up.
Yes.
Much bigger, like taller than Black Waltz 1. Zidane kind of fills everybody in about what happened when they were asleep, and this brings us into the second fight. Is this the one where it won't attack Garnet, or is that 3?
I think it's probably this one, because when you fight 3, it's Garnet's flying the ship, and the third one's only Steiner, Vivi, and Zidane. So it's got to be this one.
Other than that, it's a
straightforward fight.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Once you take care of that, Steiner says, "Yeah, I'll go aboard the ship and ask permission that we can come to Lindblom." And immediately Zidane and Garnet are like, "Oh, okay, so it's not going to Lindblom.
Yes,
it's probably going to Alexandria." But it starts to take off before we could really think about it. So we jump on just in time, and when we get inside, we see that the ship is being entirely piloted by these black mages. They do not speak. They do not acknowledge us. They just kind of walk around like golems doing their job. Poor Vivi is trying to speak to them. He's like tugging on their sleeves. He's like, hello. And they don't even acknowledge him. So this poor kid is spiraling.
Yeah, and just imagine being in his shoes. You discover that beings like yourself are coming out of this machine, are packed into barrels, and all of a sudden you get on this ship, and they're running the ship, but they don't even seem to know that you're there, or just ignoring you completely.
Garnet's going to stay with Vivi and try to cheer him up. So Zidane goes up top. He's going to go to the captain's room. Steiner is up there. He doesn't know that we're on board. He's in shambles. He's freaking out. He's like, "Oh, I've lost the princess. I'm fucked. We're done." But once he sees Zidane come up behind him, he starts to gloat a little bit. He guards the door going back down. He's like, "We're going to Alexandria. You'll be hanged, and all will be right with the world." He does say this, though. He says, "At last, Queen Braun will be pleased. However, the princess would have been left behind without the thief's aid. I shall petition for a life sentence on his behalf. Yes, that would be the honorable thing. It is my duty as a knight."
I won't want him to die, but I'll make sure he spends the rest of his life in prison.
He's so rigid. He's starting to wiggle, but he's so rigid in his worldview. His character arc is so good.
We're going to say that probably 30 more times throughout the series.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. While Steiner is sort of pondering, Zidane takes control of the ship. Interestingly, the black mages kind of start to come up and just stare at us. Like they're not interfering or speaking. They're just watching us as we take control.
It's kind of interesting too, because it's literally they just surround the cabin where Zidane is like flying the ship, and they're all just like staring in at him, and you're just like, "Oh, this is a little uncomfortable."
Garnet and Vivi make their way up top too, but unfortunately, so does Black Waltz number 3. He's kind of the most developed, it seems, which is appropriate. Something that it's not really a spoiler, but we learned that these are creations, right? They were created by Zorn and Thorn. And, this one talks the most eloquently, stands the most eloquently. He lands on the ship. And he's about to kill Vivi and take Garnet, but the other mages, they walk completely in silence and form a wall in front of Garnet and Vivi. And they start to load up their magic, but they just cannot outdo the Waltz 3. He is engineered and designed to be powerful, whereas they're kind of engineered to just be, foot soldiers.
Right.
This leads into probably the most well-known scene in the game, and for my money, one of the most effective cutscenes in Final Fantasy history. You see the Waltz just immediately, he unleashes full power. He sends every mage on board, walking, standing, in transport crates, forcibly flying off the ship. The crates are breaking and they're tumbling out. They're flying off the top of the ship. As they fall, we can see the lights in their eyes have extinguished. Mm-hmm. They're dead. And what's brilliant here is the intense level of destruction is underscored just by a single solitary piano playing in the higher tessitura, completely standing in stark contrast of the savagery being wrought upon the ship. Vivi is just completely looking in bewilderment. His entire view and perspective is just shattering. And we see that effect too with there's an imagery of a broken mirror kind of being used here.
Mm-hmm.
His sense of identity is gone. It's everything is breaking down. Even Steiner can't help but say something to the effect of, what cruelty.
Yeah, I think about this scene so much when I think about just Final Fantasy in general, because you're right, it's by far one of the most probably effective and iconic scenes. And you're right, it's beautiful in a tragic way, because that as the waltz unleashes his attacks, like all their sound just fades away, and you do have that solitary piano in there, and it's just like, yeah, it can only be a representation of like what Vivi is feeling. Vivi doesn't know what to feel. I mean, he's gone from, like you said, a kid going to see a play, discovering his kind are produced, meeting more of his kind on this ship that don't respond to him, and then another one of his kind just shows up and seems to kill all the other ones. So
he was completely alone before.
Yes.
Now, even though he is confused, he found his people.
Yes.
And now that's its own separate issue that he has to wrestle with. But he's found his people for the first time in his life. And within minutes, they're being called puppets and worthless toys and just being slaughtered.
Mm-hmm.
He's 9.
He's 9.
He's 9.
That's why we say, like, Vivi... I think Vivi stands as much of a main protagonist as Zidane does, because so much of the story focuses on kind of his character arc and the things that he has to come to terms with. And this transition is really great into the Black Waltz fight, because like you said, even Steiner comes out and is like, that's really messed up. Like, he's just like, that's beyond cruelty. And Dagger takes control of the ship while Zidane, Steiner, and Vivi go to confront the Black Waltz. And there are certain situations in the game where you have like situational trance will occur, like in a battle, representing the character's like heightened emotional state. And this is a moment where it happens here, where Vivi enters trance, and Vivi's trance design is really cool. His hat stands straight up, his robes are longer, and his trance ability is double black. You can cast black magic twice, which again, super powerful. Really awesome transition from the scene to the boss fight to like the mechanics of the fight representing how Vivi is feeling in this moment.
Yeah, well said. It's not a terribly difficult fight.
No.
It's not easy, but it's not terribly difficult at this point in the game. We don't finish him off. He chooses to jump off of the ship as, the fight is winding down. There's a really great bit of comedy here where Zidane will say, well, I think that's the last one. And Steiner is like, what? How do you know? Are you aligned with them? That sounds like something you would do. And Zidane is like, they said waltz. Wouldn't it make sense for there to only be 3? And Steiner will just like put his hand on his chin and just look at the sky for the rest of the scene. He's just so dopey.
Yeah. We come to discover, though, that we were not alone on this airship. Zorn and Thorn were flying on their own kind of mini airship from a distance, watching this battle kind of unfold. And they realize that the Black Waltz is heading straight for them. And they're like, oh no, something is terribly wrong. We made him too powerful. He's now broken. His power is kind of running wild, unchecked. And they just decide to evacuate the airship. They like kind of jump out with parachutes, and the Black Waltz like lands in the airship to give chase. And at this point, he is broken, because he's just repeating the words "I exist only to kill" over and over and over again as he kind of gives chase.
Yeah, and give chase he does. Garnet says like, I want to pilot this, and Zidane puts his trust in her, which is huge.
Yeah.
For this, for her character arc. He's like, look, I trust you. Just get us through the gate. If you want to turn and go to Alexandria, that's fine. You do what you got to do, but we got to get out of here.
Right.
So as he's zooming in, Vivi is still in shock. There's one single mage hat left, and he's just staring at it.
Yeah.
And as Waltz 3 zooms past, it knocks the hat off, which just in a snap it breaks Vivi.
Yeah.
Vivi shoots off some fire at the Waltz, and it hits him directly, causes him to pass out because he's 9. But it does give us a little bit of a head start. We get into the tunnel that is Southgate. It's kind of like a little tunnel that lets airships through. The Waltz is able to catch up. His ship is much faster than this giant cargo ship, but he goes to deliver a fatal blow to us, but accidentally catches his ship on fire, so he crashes. We barely manage to squeak through the Southgate tunnel. We cause a ton of damage to Southgate. It's destroyed for now, and our ship is as good as done once we land. But we do make it to Lindblom.
It's very Independence Day, that final scene where the gate is closing. So, yeah.
Dude, that whole scene is so spectacular.
Yeah.
PS1.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's a rendered cutscene. It looks incredible. And I love, like you described Vivi earlier too, on the theater ship when it crashed. He's very timid. He's very hesitant to take action. But in that moment, when the waltz kind of causes that last hat to fly away, he, without hesitation, puts all of his strength into like an attack to like fight off the black waltz. So yeah, it's just great Vivi scenes early on. So good.
So we are now entering Lindblom. Alexandria was kind of, Renaissance style, medieval style. It's not a wealthy city. It's not a poor city, but it's not super wealthy. Lindblom is impossibly large, very wealthy, and very technologically advanced. The castle itself is inside of the city, and airships fly inside of the castle. It is immense.
It's such a stark contrast to, like, Alexandria is a city, but when you see Alexandria, it's more picturesque. It's like the castle on a waterfall overlooking a more modest-sized town, and Lindblom is a metropolis. It's a gigantic city, and yeah, it couldn't be two more different locations. But this is the place we were trying to get to. It's where Garnet wanted to get to. It's where the Tantalus guys were originally going to bring her if they kidnapped her. So we've successfully arrived at our location, albeit kind of not in the manner that we expected to, that's for sure.
Exactly so. We are, there's some brief security, but we are let in by Minister Artania, who is Garnet's uncle. We are told that Regent Cid is expecting us, which we are surprised to hear. So he takes us to him. When we enter the chambers, what we see is a toddler-sized Oglop, the bugs from the beginning, wearing a cape and a large mustache. Steiner sees this and immediately, because he loves hierarchy and hates Oglops, decides to throw a haymaker that sends the Oglop flying across the room. I love this scene, man.
It's so good. Zero hesitation. He just screams Oglop, runs up, and just like prime Mike Tyson, just full on punches him across the room. And Minister Artania is like, that's the regent.
Yeah, that is Cid. And Cid is also her uncle. I'm not sure if they said that yet, but Cid is Garnet's uncle.
Yes.
So Artania explains, some time ago, someone snuck in the middle of the night, kidnapped Cid's wife Hilda and the airship, and turned Cid into an Oglop. That's the official story.
Unfortunate.
Cid is still able to talk, and mostly his mind is the same. It's not quite as sharp, but he's still able to speak and everything. He says, take some time to rest and eat before we get down to business. Zidane's not about that life. He doesn't like the high-class food, so he goes down to a local pub where the soup of the day is soup de silence, which is pretty funny.
Yes.
The first thing I noticed when I walked in is that the bartender and patrons all have spectacular mustaches here.
Yes.
There's got to be something in the water.
Lindblom is the city of great facial hair.
Stinky pickles and great facial hair.
Absolutely. Maybe it is the pickles. I don't know.
So Zidane starts hitting up a waitress with some Riz.
Yep.
And one of the patrons in a red cloak says, hey, you're harassing, like, just quit being annoying. And they start to bicker and fight, but it becomes clear that she's a friend. She's like, it's good to see you, Zidane. And just like Lou Bega, he starts cycling through names over and over. He's like, are Chelsea?
Yeah.
A little bit of Monica? A little bit of Rachel? But eventually he places it. It's Freya. This is Freya Crescent, one of my favorite characters in this game that deserved so much more care for her story.
Yes.
She didn't get. We'll get to that. But we learned two things here. She's in town for the Festival of the Hunt, and she still hasn't found her lost love, her boyfriend, Sir Fratley. We'll get into that later. Man, what do you think of Freya?
I immediately saw her, and this is pre not knowing anything about the rest of the Final Fantasy series. I mean, her design evokes, the classic Dragoon a design that we see in earlier Final Fantasies. But I was immediately just struck by like kind of her design, the way she looked, how she had the crest on the front of her. I was immediately drawn to her as a character. Not even back then, you couldn't really tell, like knowing that she was essentially a rat person. But even then, in the higher fidelity games, knowing that she's one of my favorite characters, and the Dragoon class overall is probably one of my favorite classes. So yeah, Freya's great, and it's cool to see that her and Zidane kind of have a little bit of history there that will get kind of fleshed out a little later in the game. But yeah, and when we get the drop, obviously you hear Festival of the Hunt, and you're like, well, that sounds cool, and something that cool can't possibly pass us by without us participating in some way. So just a teaser for later.
Right. And Freya is a very skilled hunter and fighter. I mean, Freya is the Norse god of the hunt, and
yes,
among other things, because those Norse gods just represented everything.
Yeah, she's a dragon knight for her nation. So
intentionally chosen name. Nominal determinants is what we call that. Back with Garnet, she is explaining to Cid that nobody at the castle was taking her seriously. She's been saying, like, I've seen this mysterious guy walking around. My mom has just been acting so weird, but everybody just keeps telling me, oh, you're just sad because your dad died. The king passed away. So nobody's taking her seriously. And she's like, that's why I had to sneak up on board of the Tantalus ship to come here. And yes, Tantalus does have ties to Lindblom. What's more is that Cid reveals here that he actually hired Tantalus. He was the one that put the hit out on Garnet. Well, not a hit. He asked Baku, which is like his old friend. He's like, please kidnap the princess. Because had he tried to intervene officially, he was afraid that it would have set Braun off. If you talk to NPCs, everybody associates Braun with being war happy. She really likes to start wars and conflicts, and he did not want that. Mm-hmm. So this is how we had to do it. We had to keep it under the table.
Right.
Speaking of Tantalus, we do get an ATE. Baku, Marcus, and Cinna, they did escape. They're looking for cures for Blank's petrification. We also get an ATE that establishes Steiner's love of pickles, and we meet Grandma Pickle, which is one of the coolest NPCs in the game, if for no other reason than her name.
Right.
Grandma Pickle. The Lindblom pickles are called Geisel pickles, and they're notoriously stinky.
But he likes them for some reason. Don't we also get a AT2 of him like wandering the city, just being like, this city's too big, I can't find my way around? Small town
night in a big city.
Yeah, small town night in a big city, yep.
Zidane and Vivi get to poke around here. Vivi, by the way, I was doing a lot of entological research. Oh shit, is that the right research on language and names? Vivi is an old Greek word that fundamentally means alive, to live, and that's translated into the Spanish verb vivir, the Italian word viviere, to live.
Wow, that's perfect. Perfect.
I'm telling you, man, everything in this game is just so well focused onto the theme. You're poking around. Zidane is from here, sort of, so he's going around to the old haunts, to the old Tantalus hideout. You can get some collectibles here, a Moogle suit from a local heartthrob in the theater world, if you want to. Mm-hmm. But after you explore, after you go to the hideout, collect some discarded treasure chests, you go back to the castle. And you find out that Garnet is missing. And you find this out because Steiner is just having a fit. And he runs out to find her. But we find her first. We can hear the singing that we heard in Dali. So we know that she's up top somewhere. So we steal a guard's armor, a sleepy guard. We just steal it. We use it to go onto the lift. Security is tighter here because the Festival of the Hunt is going on. Mm-hmm. And we find Garnet outside, up on top of like an observatory tower kind of deal.
Yeah, we're kind of, and she's just kind of there looking out over, there's a giant telescope which you can kind of see like the whole entire breadth of the land and the mountain range they just came from and all that stuff. And we get the sense that Garnet, or Dagger, kind of has a little bit of a cold shoulder towards Zidane, just kind of whatever happened, because there was a scene while they were getting on the airship where they were like climbing up the ladder and like Zidane was behind her and he kind of like snuck like a little tushy grab, kind of just.
I was hoping we could just skip it.
I know. But it kind of plays into like she kind of has this cold shoulder and He just kind of wants to talk to her, and she's not really like engaging him in conversation and stuff. And the funny thing is, during the bar scene when Zidane met with Freya, when he was hitting on that waitress, he was like, "Hey, why don't we go on an airship cruise or whatever?" And Zidane, kind of being, like the flirt master, was like, "Hey, like, what if we go on that airship cruise I mentioned?" And Dagger's like, "What are you talking about? You never mentioned an airship cruise to me." And he's like, "Oh, that was the other girl." And he's like, "Well," she's like, "I guess, have a great time on your airship ride with the other girl." It's just kind of like a funny, like, how Zidane kind of like gets mixed up with all that. So that's kind of what was going on there with that conversation.
Put a super brief pin in that. But I kind of got the read that it wasn't like, I don't know how to say this. I don't see that scene. Like, people talk about that scene like it is a blister on this game, like a war to disgusting thing that needs to be removed. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I thought that the reason that she was kind of being aloof here was because she's grappling with feelings of helplessness. We can hear her sort of inner monologuing when we first come up here that, she had to be rescued. Uncle Sid had to put in all the work. Everyone's waiting on her, like just making sure that she's okay. She's feeling kind of helpless. That was kind of my read on it, but
no.
I there's got to be, because the Zidane's wrong girl remark happens in a couple minutes. So I don't know. It could be a little of column A, a little of column B, but she's definitely starting to feel her self-consciousness increase and feel like a burden to everybody.
Yes, and the only reason I was explaining that was, and first of all, I agree with you. I don't think that scene is, it's fine. It's like it's whatever. Like I don't think
it wouldn't be put in today.
Yeah,
but
no,
it's not like
it's not the most.
You don't need to protest the game.
Yeah, it's not the most egregious thing that any of us has ever seen in video games. I was kind of just taking that approach because during this playthrough, I was like really hyper focused specifically on like their relationship to one another, because they always have like this, for most of the game, they have this kind of awkward, like they have feelings for each other, but there is kind of like this little bit awkward tension, because this is like, Zidane he likes girls, he likes to flirt with girls, but this is the first time where he's like actually really felt anything serious for somebody, and not just in like the kind of the skirt chasing way. So, but you're right too. It's just awkward timing too, because Zidane's like trying to flirt with her, and she is caught in this moment of kind of like self-reflection and helplessness, and really realizing after her talk with Sid, she's like, nobody was listening to me and nobody is taking me seriously. Like, what can I do to possibly, because she knows that something is coming. She's like, what can I do to possibly prevent any of these things coming? Because she knows that her mother is not the same person that she was before her father passed. So yeah, I think it's a lot of subtext mixed into that scene for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot on her mind.
Yeah. And Zidane's just trying to flirt with her.
Yeah.
So
One thing that's important here is that, Garnett asks, "How were you going to kidnap me if I didn't want to go?" Mm. And he's like, "Well, we were going to give you a bunch of sleeping weed. It'll just knock you out." And she immediately asks if she can have some, because she's just fucking chill like that, dude.
Yeah.
She's like, "Could I get some of that weed?" And he's like, "Well, I don't." I think he says, "Well, if you're having trouble sleeping, like, just invite me over." And she's like, "Yeah, nice try."
When he mentioned sleeping weed, when he's like, "Yeah, you just take this and it knocks you right out," I'm like, man, I could go for some of that for sure. Just put me right out. I'll take some of that for sure.
Is that legal in shit? Are you in Indiana or Illinois?
I'm in Indiana.
No, it's one of the two.
So
is that legal there?
I don't know, because I'm like so close to the border, and
okay.
The county I'm in is literally like the only quote unquote like blue county in Indiana. All the rest are red. So I know it's getting really big in Chicago. I can't imagine if it's not legal here in Indiana that it won't be for much longer, just because they'll see like, oh shit, everyone's making a ton of money off this.
Yeah.
So maybe I should open like a video game weed shop and have sleeping weed. I mean, that seems like the move.
Let me know how that goes, man. I'll drive over and patronize.
Yeah, I'll invite you over for sure.
So for some reason, everybody, including Freya, is waiting in Garnett's room, because why not? This is where the guards explain the rules of the Festival of the Hunt. Zidane and Freya are competing, and Zidane signed Vivi up without him knowing, which is fun.
He's a little distraction after what he just went through.
Yeah. It's timed. I think it's either 12 or 14 minutes, and you just kill as many monsters as you can. You're in control of Zidane. The pro strat is to let Freya win. If Zidane wins, you get 5,000 gil, which, you know, at this point in the game, it might be a lot, but it's not worth it. If Vivi wins, he gets the Theatership card. If you're a card completionist, maybe, but it's not really worth it. Freya gets the Coral Ring, which lets her learn a specific Dragoon ability, so that is the way to go. The trouble is that there's a quote-unquote boss here, the Zagnol monster. It only appears after 4.5 minutes are left on the clock, and the way it works out is that Freya can actually not deal the winning blow. This is basically like Quidditch. Whoever kills the Zagnol wins.
Yeah.
Freya cannot deal the killing blow. The fight will go on forever unless Zidane is dead, knocked out. I don't know. It's just like a coding thing. So the strat is to let Zidane kill himself or have the monster kill him and then let Freya just take it down.
Yeah, I find this concept of the Festival of the Hunt so fascinating, where it's just like, this is our big festival. It's like, what do they do? It's like they let wild monsters just roam the streets of the city, and then people go and hunt them. I'm just imagining like a real world equivalent to that, like what that would look like. It's just kind of insane when you think about it. Also, too, a little caveat about Zidane and Dagger's talk up on the lookout is that Zidane got Dagger to agree that if he won the Festival of the Hunt, she would go out on a date with him. So that was like, he's just doing it to kind of show off. So,
right, exactly.
Which if somebody walked up to me and was like, "Hey, I'll go on a date with you if you win like this hunting festival," I'd be like, "I'm down. I'll participate in any festival you want."
We don't have much time to celebrate, unfortunately, because after the rewards are given, a Burmesian soldier enters the chamber. He's on the verge of death, and he does indeed die after he tells us that Burmesia is under attack by an army of black mages. To investigate whether this is really Braun or not, we obviously are going. But Sid first suggests, like, hey, like, you've got to recharge, you've got to refuel, we've got to wait for the gate to open. Let's eat, because the Festival of the Hunt feast is a tradition. Mm-hmm. So everybody's gathering around this huge table, they're eating, and one by one, everybody passes out. Steiner is like, the food is poison. I can't believe it. I should have checked. And she's like, Garnett looks at him and says, well, I didn't put any in yours. And then he says, oh, well, now that you mention it, I feel totally fine.
Yeah.
Garnett laced everybody's food with sleeping weed. She's finally starting to break out of her shell and take things into her own hands. And this is the way she starts, by drugging everybody.
Yeah, she's made the decision that she needs to go back to Alexandria and figure out what's going on. And her talk with Zidane kind of led her, and with Sid kind of led her in that direction, where she's like, I know if I'm there, I can convince my mother to stop whatever she's doing. Or it's basically brought on by the catalyst of the soldier from Burmesia, like, showing up, right? And she makes the connection with the Black Mages with Alexandria. Like, all the connections are kind of making themselves at this point. So, yeah, she determines to kind of take it into her own hands and is like, I need to act on this. I need to do something to stop this if I can. And, yeah, very clever move by her. And credit to her for outsmarting Zidane. I mean, Zidane, for all of his belief that he showed in her, allowing her to fly the airship through the gate, doesn't think that she would ever do anything like that to him, to kind of do things on her own. And she does. She steps up and proves him wrong. So, yeah, very, very cool moment for Garnet, I think.
Yeah. It's great to see her come out of her shell a little bit. Steiner at first doesn't approve of this. He also wants to figure out what's going on, but this is breaching protocol, and you don't breach protocol. Garnet, on the other hand, she just wants to figure this out because she cares about her mom. Mm-hmm. So they are opposed, but Steiner's like, look, I mean, I have to protect you however I can, so I'll go with you.
Right.
And it's funny because as soon as they wake up, Zidane, Vivi, and everybody, Zidane immediately knows what happened. Yep. He's like, Garnet did this. And he's pissed about it. Freya's going to come with us. She suggests going through Gizmaluk's grotto to get to Burmesia. It's the quickest route. There is some side stuff that is worth doing, specifically picking up a character and doing some side questing. I think let's save those for the top of the next episode, just to kind of keep time a little bit slimmer here. We will talk about picking up Quina and doing the Chocobo Forest at the very start of the next episode.
Yes.
That sound good?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Gizmaluke's Grotto. That's where we're going. It's completely littered with dead and dying Burmesian soldiers. It's really tragic.
Yeah.
And of course, who is in here but Zorn and Thorn? They are sicking these black mages on us. The mages are now hostile. They only say one word. They say kill. And we're going to have to fight a bunch of them as we're going through here, much to Vivi's dismay, I'm sure. Speaking of Vivi, there's a really cute scene with Vivi and one of the Moogles. Vivi picked up a Kupo nut in a previous ATE, and the Moogles here, there's one Moogle trapped under a bell, and his wife is trying to get him out, and she's like, oh, we got a Kupo nut, and he just Herculeses the bell off of himself. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, they'd come there for the Moogles, they'd come there to like get married, and yeah, her husband got like trapped under the bell, however that he accomplished that. So, but yeah, Gizmaluke's
Moogle things.
Yeah, Moogle as Moogles do. Gizmaluke's Grotto is this very kind of, it feels like with how you have to get the bells to unlock the doors, it feels like this very ceremonial place, as well as being a passage between the mountains that separate Lindblum from Burmecia. So, and it's a place obviously too that the Burmesians protect. So, obviously, yeah, Zorn and Thorn are there. Take it out of commission. It's military. It's very clearly a military campaign being led by Alexandria. I mean, the connections are obvious. We saw it on the cargo ship. Zorn and Thorn are here. Like this is Alexandria's doing. This is Queen Bronn's doing.
Yeah. Those bells, by the way, those bell puzzles, the doors will be locked. You just have to pick up some bells, and they functionally serve as disposable key cards, basically. Yeah. It's neat.
Yeah.
This grotto is ruled over by Master Gizmaluke, who is a sort of water monster that is generally peaceful. He kind of watches over weddings and coronations and things like that, but because of Zorn and Thorn, he's hostile. The reason that we want to get Quina first is because this is a tough boss fight, and if you don't have a healer, and having only 3 members makes this really tough. The pro strat for this one, Gizmaluke is very susceptible to debuffs, so if you toss a tent on him at the start of the party, there's a great chance he's going to get blinded and silenced and slowed. It's a really, really good strategy. But if you don't have Quina, this can be really tough.
I'm going to be honest, in all my years of playing that game, I didn't know you could use tents in that fashion. Very surprised. Wow.
This game doesn't do a lot of revolutionary things with the battle system, but it is cool that it rewards you for experimenting like that, If you use a tent in battle to heal your own characters, you notice that. You see, oh yeah, it's going to give me some debuffs for some reason, because it balances it out. Otherwise, you're getting fully healed. If you use it on an enemy, well, yeah, it's going to heal them, but it's going to debuff them too.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
Wow. I never would have thought that. That's so cool. 20 years later, still taking me to school.
The game that keeps on giving.
Yeah, wow. Unbelievable.
We're going to cut to Steiner here. He's smuggling Garnet in a hobo sack that's full of those stinky pickles.
Yes.
And that's how they make it through Southgate. The guards kind of do their checks. They want to check the bag, but when they smell the pickles, that guard hates pickles, so he's like, just go through. Just get out of my sight. This is how they get through. And you eventually get onto a train bound for Alexandria. Our destination right now is to go to Trano. Do you remember why that's where they want to go at the moment? Is that just a midpoint between Alexandria and there? Yeah,
so the tram takes them to like the top of the mountain because they have to go on foot because the Southgate air passage got destroyed. And they have to catch the connecting train at like the top of the mountain. And that's where they run into the members of Tantalus. And by talking to Cinna and Marcus, Garnet discovers that Marcus is going to Trano to look for the super soft, the cure for the petrification for Blank. So Garnet feels like she owes it to help them because Blank helped her escape from the evil forest. So that's when her, Steiner, and Marcus kind of take like a detour to help Marcus find the super soft and rescue Blank.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
For some reason I thought they were going to Trano no matter what.
No, they were originally going to go to Alexandria, but when they ran into Marcus, that's when they all kind of caught up, and Marcus was like, yeah, I need to save my bro. And Garnet's like, well, I have to help because he saved us. So I think that gets a little bit into disc 2, if I remember correctly.
Gotcha. So that's where Garnet and Steiner are right now. He thinks about Zidane a little bit, but he still doesn't really like him. He doesn't approve of him. So we're just about at the end of disc 1 here. Zidane and company arrive at Bermesia. This is the city of eternal rain and Freya's home. She hasn't returned here for years, I think 5 years, since setting off to find Fratley. Just like Gizamluke's grotto, dead and dying soldiers are just lining the city, and it is in ruins. Of course, Zorn and Thorn are here too.
We get some interesting, too, kind of when we all go into the city. Freya hesitates for just a moment, and she can't really believe that she's back here because it's not explicitly stated, but I feel like we just get kind of from the way she talks about leaving her home to go and find Sir Fratley, that she kind of abandoned her home. She didn't think she would be back here. She didn't want to come back unless she found him, because all she ever heard was rumors of his death. And so she has a lot of emotions returning to this place, her home that's under attack, where that she had a duty to protect, returning without the person that she loves. So it's a very incredible story arc we get for starting from Freya, who we just met not that long ago.
She has a nice moment here that compounds onto that with Vivi too. Mm-hmm. She hesitates. She's, like you said, and Vivi says, "Come on, let's go." And she says, "What you find? Are you sure you want to go? What you may find may change your life forever." And Vivi, again, 9 years old, no reason he should be after thinking this. He says, "But I have to find out who I am. I'm scared. What if I'm not even human?" And Freya doesn't know what to say to that, rightfully so. But it's just so good, man.
Yeah,
that's one of the greatest strengths of this game is how they intertwine the human condition in with these fictional characters. It's just good writing.
And they're so like subtle. They don't beat you over the head with these moments either. They're so subtle where it's like you said, Vivi just kind of casually drops this thing. He's like, "I'm scared. I have to find out who I am." And you're just reading that and you're like, holy shit. There's so much in that exchange that's just unspoken, but just makes you think so much. It's incredible. And it's just underscored by the absolute brutality that Freya has to witness happening to her people in her home, where the black mages are just slaughtering her people in that city.
It's really brutal.
Yes.
We're going to run into some soldiers that are alive in here. One named Dan, Freya actually knows. We're telling them all, get out of here. You got to get out of Dodge. You're in danger here. And we head in further towards the palace to see if we can find the king. Who we find instead is Bronn standing in there, and General Beatrix, who is introduced as the cold-blooded knight who knows no mercy. Mm-hmm. Freya has a tie with her because it turns out that was Fratley's mission, was to find General Beatrix. It was a sort of like a fantasy thing. He heard that Beatrix is the strongest general in the land. He wanted to challenge her. Mm-hmm. There's a third man with them, though, this mysterious man that Garnet saw lurking around the castle. This is Kuja. Inexplicably the sexiest character in this video game.
When I first played, didn't even know that he was a man because his features are very feminine.
Very androgynous.
Yes.
It's tough to tell his gender just by looking at him. Not that matters, don't get me wrong, but it's like it's painting his character is just like that, capital L, capital T. He speaks like he's always in a play as well. He's very dramatic.
Yes.
We're gonna learn so much more about him, and I'm looking forward to seeing if my previous thoughts hold up. What we learn now, though, is that the mages were given to Bronn by him, sold, we're not sure yet, and they want to finish off the king. Kuja says that they probably left for the neighboring settlement of Clara. It was like an offshoot of Bermesia. Mm-hmm. They kind of split. One group of Bermesians split off to form their own thing. So that's where they're going. One of those previous soldiers that we saw, Dan, rushes in to challenge Beatrix. He's protecting his home. And as soon as he hears who she is, he says, no thanks. And he runs away.
And Beatrix, too, has this kind of cool monologue where she's like, seriously, she's like, you don't know who I am. I've defeated 100 knights single-handedly in one battle. Very much like I don't know why I just saw this now, but it's very much like the scene in Goldmember when Austin Powers' dad like walks in and he's like, do you know who I am? He's like, you don't even have a name tag. Like, you're nobody. You stand no chance. Just lay down on the ground right there. Very, very much like that.
Do you want to hear something? I've never seen that movie.
Oh, really? Okay. It's
Never.
It's very much like making fun of like the James Bond trope of how he just kills like nameless henchmen. So he's like my reputation, like I'm a spy, like you're just nobody. So just lay down on the ground and be dead so I don't have to like kill you, basically. So the same kind of energy there. Beatrix is just like you don't stand a chance. You're nothing compared to me.
I love Beatrix so much.
Yes.
Because we jumped down to protect Dan, we're about to fight her. This is a fixed fight. She wipes your party no matter what, with Stock Break or Clim Hazard. I think she could use both. And this is how Disc 1 ends. Our party is laying defeated in the pouring rain. We never stood a chance. And we get this CG cutscene as Braun and Beatrix leave. Kuja notices us. He says, this boy could become a problem. Mm-hmm. We don't know if he means Vivi or Zidane. He knows something that we don't, and the cutscene shows him getting onto his silver dragon and takes off. And that's how Disc 1 ends. Pretty fucking bleak for our party.
I have some thoughts, especially on the Beatrix fight too, which I think as we run into her again in Disc 2, I'll save it to elaborate on it there a little bit more, because even though this fight against her is fixed, I absolutely love this fight. It's so good, and the song that plays, The Wavering Blade, is such a it's so good, man. Oh, I love it so much, and it just establishes Beatrix's character in such a incredible way that when things happen later in the game that kind of lead her on her own journey of discovery, it's just, it all ties together so well. I could go off on a tangent, but I know we gotta finish up with this one here. So it's just it's so
no,
good.
it's okay. It's okay, man. My goal for this series isn't to just make it 3 parts so we could just summarize the story. Like, I want to get into these discussions. Luckily, we're going to see Beatrix way more often. So we're going to have plenty of time to talk about her and her internal struggles and how she is characterized. For right now, we just know that she's a badass. She's working for the enemy, and we don't stand a chance.
Right.
And this is how we close out Disc 1. We, for all intents and purposes, right now, we've lost.
Yeah, which is an incredibly somber ending for Disc 1 for sure, and just kind of really punctuates how much the stakes have risen since we started this game as kind of like a fantasy adventure, right? We're going to kidnap the princess while performing this play, and now all of a sudden we have become embroiled in a war where Queen Braun is using mages that look like Vivi, and now this Kuja character is the stakes have just risen so much from the introduction to where we are now. And it, for any other game, it might seem like whiplash, but it does such a good job along the way of getting us to this point. It just seems like a natural escalation of the story. It's such a beautiful way. It's such a perfect way to end Disc 1. So good.
Yeah, I agree completely. The strength of this game, a lot of it lies in Disc 1 and Disc 2. Mm-hmm. There's some iffy moments and things, they don't fall apart, but the latter third of this game, fourth of this game, isn't quite as strong, but this game sets up the premise and sets up the narrative and sets up the characters' internal strifes and struggles so well. So much better than a lot of the other Final Fantasy games and better than a lot of other JRPGs even. Mm-hmm. It's really brilliant, and I'm looking forward to diving into more as we get into Disc 2 and 3, where some of these character moments become more center stage. Disc 1, a lot of today, we did talk about characters and their internal struggles and some of the illusions, but a lot of this was just moving the plot forward because that's this part of the game. But it's going to get much more introspective as we move forward, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I am too. And there's so much conversation that even probably however many 3 or 4 parts we do probably wouldn't cover all the conversations that we could potentially have just of the themes and the characters and how well this ensemble cast of characters kind of go on their own journey separately, but also kind of grow together as a group of characters. It's so well done. So if this isn't convincing you enough that Rick is we're doing three or how many episodes this ends up being on it, like, go and play this game if you have not yet already.
It's one of the best.
Yes.
It's one of the best. I know extremely few people who do not like this game. There are some people that like 6 more or 10 more, but I don't know many people that do not like Final Fantasy IX.
Yeah, definitely. I would say definitely gets overshadowed by 7 from this era for sure. And I understand for all the reasons, like 7 was an incredibly important game, but 9 just does so much that a lot of the other games don't do. So
one of my favorite JRPG YouTubers, his name is Pro Jared. Most people know him, unfortunately, for that whole scandal, but he had a really good line when he did a video on 9. He said 7 is the most important one, 6 is my favorite one, his favorite one, but 9 is the best one. Just sum of all of its parts. If you take everything as a cumulative package, it just outshines so many other entries in the series. I tell you, man, I've played at this point more of them than I haven't, and I just don't think any of them stand up cumulatively to 9.
Yeah, it's like they set out to design a celebration of the series, and this game just perfectly encapsulates every single aspect of Final Fantasy and even Kingdom Hearts and even Square Enix games that I love. They do such a good job of telling these unique stories in the way nobody else does, and nothing that's perfectly encapsulated by everything that 9 is. Even like you said, the weaker parts when some of the stuff kind of falls apart in Disc 3, which Final Fantasy games tend to struggle with that when they take the turn towards the more, we call it the quote unquote Final Fantasy aspects of the story of the game, where things just kind of start getting really crazy. Like we start getting all the, God stuff, and when all that stuff starts to show up. But even then, like it does that better than a lot of the games for sure.
We're going to get into more of that next time. We're going to start right where we left off. We're going to talk about Quina and the Chocobo Forest next time, and then we'll get right into Disc 2. As I did this time, I will let all of you know where we're going to play up to, so no chance of being spoiled on anything meaningful. And when I say meaningful, I take into consideration what that word truly means. I'm not going to, if I think it might be meaningful, I won't spoil it. For now, we're going to wrap it up for today. Eric, you have been on the show many a time. Well, maybe not many. We got to get you on here more often, and that's why you're here. But you've been on the show before, and you've talked about Unlockables a few times in the past. Your podcast, that is the Unlockables, it's a terrific show. I'm a huge fan. I can't say I've listened to everything Kingdom Hearts you've done, because I am actually playing through that series right now, and I want to use your episodes as a reference after I finish up. But what I have listened to, it's phenomenally done. You're really leaning into the solo aspect of your show, going more into writing components, and it's just all around extraordinarily well done, and one of my favorite shows. So would you mind telling the listeners here a little bit about what you do on the Unlockables? And if you would be so kind, give them a recommendation if they've never listened to you before. Where should they start? What's a good episode to start with?
Absolutely. I'll stammer through that now that I'm just very uncomfortable taking compliments that undeserved, Rick, undeserved. You're too kind, sir, but thank you. I appreciate that. So my name's Eric. I host the Unlockables. I bill it as the story of video games, the people who play them, and the memories made along the way. It started off as this kind of journey to talk to other people in the space and just kind of share our love of games and work that emotional connection between people and games. I started working on that, but about a year ago, I started on this journey reviewing my favorite game series of all time, Kingdom Hearts, and it kind of became this, I want to talk about something that I love and something that outside of the hardcore fan base that the Kingdom Hearts fan base is, not a lot of people really understand like what it's all about and why people love it so much. And so I've embarked on this insane quest over the last year and a half to replay the entire Kingdom Hearts series in full and kind of explain and try and connect all the plot threads and talk about all the themes and really kind of push back on the general gamer narrative that Nomura is just some like crazy crackpot dude in a corner just throwing shit together and ruining Final Fantasy, which is certainly not the case. But it's kind of become, you know, a show for other people to listen to, but also kind of like a personal journal where I've kind of reflected on the importance that Kingdom Hearts has had on my life and how I've always managed to kind of play those games at really pivotal moments in my life's journey. And I find myself doing it again as, you know, I'm gonna have a kid in March. My son will be born, my first kid. And here I am again playing Kingdom Hearts at a pivotal time in my life. So that's really what the show has become the last couple months. I'm trying to get most of those episodes done before said child shows up. And if you want to check out any of that stuff, you can go to linktr.ee/Unlockables Podcast. All the links are there. Instagram. I have a Discord server, but I'm also in like all the other Discord servers. I'm in Rick's Discord server, so you can say hi to me. And if you want to get started on that crazy adventure with me, the first episode, Kingdom Hearts 1 Part 1, is a good start, good place to start. I'm calling that series Guiding Keys. I think there's 16 episodes as of right now that total just over 24 hours of Kingdom Hearts content. So a full day of Nomura madness. If you think you can handle that, it's quite a lot. It's very thorough, but I'm very, very proud of that series. So, and then if you want to listen to more of the collaborative stuff I've done, I had Rick on my show. He was one of the first guests I had on my show. I interviewed him, and we just talked about our love of video games. That's also a fantastic episode. He was also on for the Christmas special I did last year, 12 Games of Christmas. We talked about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the sequel to that game, which escapes my mind because I'm thinking Turtles in Time. Shredder's Revenge. Shredder's Revenge. Yeah, I was thinking Turtles in Time. But those are both fantastic places to start. And again, I've also had the honor of being on Rick's show for Shredder's Revenge, for Cuphead, and for Three Houses, I believe.
Three Houses.
Yes. So I'm kind of, Rick's podcast is kind of like my summer vacation home. I kind of show up here and stay for a while and have a good time.
Yeah, I'm the second. I'm the home away from home that the taxes are a little bit better on, so you don't sell it.
Yes. I have a timeshare with a couple other people in the community on Rick's show, so now I can't get out of the contract.
Yeah, I'm litigious like that.
Yep.
the Unlockables, the Guiding Keys series definitely deserves the respect that it gets on throughout Twitter and throughout the Discords. Highly recommend checking it out. The Kingdom Hearts series is not as complicated as people make it out to be. I think the people that say that, and this is coming from somebody that's now playing through these, I think the folks that say that just haven't played the games that are between the mainline titles, so they don't know what's going on. You know, it's like starting with Godfather 2. It's
right.
Like, well, maybe that's a bad example because I actually haven't seen Godfather.
A big part of that narrative too, if I can just go off on a tangent too, was when Kingdom Hearts 3 was coming out. That was kind of a big deal, and it was the first time a numbered Kingdom Hearts title had been coming out in over 13 years. So from the time that Kingdom Hearts 2 and Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, we had this evolution of gaming YouTube, of streamer culture, of retrospectives, of stuff like that. And so that was kind of the buzzy thing. It's like, oh, Kingdom Hearts 3 is going to come out, and a bunch of the big content creators were like, we're going to play Kingdom Hearts 3 because that'll get us views. And of course they're going to be like, this game is stupid because it makes no sense. It's like, well, yeah, you just jumped on it for the views and you created this narrative around it that makes no sense because you didn't put in the time that the series does require of you. So yeah, it's fake news, false narrative.
So definitely check that out. Kingdom Hearts, Guiding Keys. That series is really good. The non-Kingdom Hearts related shows are good as well. Check those out too. In particular, you've got a good one on Advance Wars, the remake and remaster, and Final Fantasy 16. Those are both good episodes as well. And like Eric said, if you want to check him out more on our show, you can check out the Shredder's Revenge episode, the Cuphead episode, and the Three Houses episode. All of those feature Eric. 2 of them feature other people too. But you'll have to check that out to hear about that. I'm going to have a link to all of Eric's stuff in the description, so if you want to follow him on socials, if you want to join his Discord server, you can do that. You're going to also find our links in there as well. Our link tree, our Instagram, our Discord, our Twitter, Blue Sky, all of it. Join the Discord. It's free and it's fun. I like it a whole lot, and it's a great way to collaborate with the community. You can join our Patreon page if you're so inclined as well. You can check that out at You can check that out at patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. Never expected, always appreciated, etc., etc.
Nonsense. Pay for the Patreon or I'll find you.
Yeah, you can, some of the bonus episodes, the patrons get to vote and decide what extra episodes they get. Some of them recently have been Amplitude for PS2, the Sopranos game for PS2, which is fucking awful. And for this month, January of 24, we have the Sega Saturn game, Mr. Bones, which is currently my most expensive Saturn game. I think it's like $120 right now.
Nice.
I'm not sure. So you can check that out if you want. For now, this is going to be a behemoth of a series, and I'm excited to dig more into this as we go on. But for today, Eric, thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate all of your time across these episodes. It's going to be a blast. I'm so glad that you're joining me here today and here in the future. All right, as ever, I am your host, Rick. We're signing off for now. Next time, we'll start Disc 2, and we'll see where we get to. All right, everyone, take care. Catch you next time.